2021 meeting of the Clive City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Cirksena.
Here.
Council members Klein.
Here.
Klein. Thank you. Edwards.
One moment, I'm bringing Councilman Edwards in. I said I do not see Councilman Edwards attempting in the meeting at this time.
Okay. McCoy.
Here.
Judkins.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I'm sure John will be joining us shortly. We have a young Grant Sorrell here from Clive Boy Scout Troop 208 to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Pete, will you connect with young Grant?
One
I
moment.
trust he's here.
Yes, he is. One moment. Grant, this is Pete. You should be able to unmute or start your video at this point.
Hello.
Good evening, Grant. Thank you for being with us and for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your scouting.
I am in Troop 208 from Clive, Iowa. I've been in scouting or in Boy Scouts for about half a year now. I joined, well, actually probably around a year now.
Yeah. Outstanding. Well, good to have you with us tonight. And so you'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and everybody else will be muted, so we'll have good sound quality for that. So if you're ready, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. Thank you, Grant. We really appreciate you being with us tonight, and you can come back anytime, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Good luck in your scouting.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is approval of the agenda. I'm not aware of any changes.
Move approval.
Second.
It's moved
Your
by
Honor,
Ted, second. Moved
Your Honor,
by-
I would request we pull item AO off for further discussion.
Eric, if you can hold on just a moment, that'll be a discussion item. So it's moved and seconded. Further discussion, you want to pull which one?
Item AO.
Eric, could you say who moved and seconded that again? We got overlapping audio on it.
It was moved by Ted, seconded by Michael, I believe.
Thank you.
Councilmember Klein would like to pull AO for discussion. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? The balance of the consent items are approved 4-0. Has John come on yet?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, John, thank you.
He
Item
hasn't
AO.
Mr.
Eric?
Mayor, he
Yeah.
hasn't missed one forever. And so we knew he was getting on, didn't we?
Oh, I knew he was coming on. It was just a matter of time. Councilmember Klein.
Yeah, quick question, and Matt, maybe you can help me with this. So Elder Corporation was approved in our bills for doing some demolition on the Alice Road project. And they were also selected by low bid to do the Indian Hills clearing as well. So these are two totally separate projects right here. On the Indian Hills project, they were $27,000 less than the other bidder. So my question is do they understand the scope of this job? Is their background consistent with doing both road demolition and the type of clearing and grubbing necessary for the Indian Hills project? And also, do we have any references from them for this type of landscaping type work?
Oh, definitely. Well, Rachel is on the call here and has been leading this element of the Indian Hills Woods. Rachel, would you comment on Councilmember Klein's questions for us?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So Elder did visit the site and had called me and asked several questions to make sure they understood the scope. Elder was on the list because Jim recommended them. And so while I haven't worked with them on demolition and tree removal, they do have a history of that, and they're definitely qualified to perform that work.
What other projects have they worked on for tree removal and this type of clearing and grubbing?
A good question. I guess I am not aware of the specific projects. I apologize. I can look into that though.
Perhaps you can get back to me on that.
This is Jeff May. Elder is a multidisciplinary contractor. They do underground work. They do the restoration associated with that. They do clearing and grubbing with their large projects and so forth. While they don't specifically do just this type of work all the time, they incorporate this into their work. Are a very large corporation capable of, or large company, I don't want to say corporation, but large company capable of this type of work. And very good to work
Good enough.
with on the projects we've had them.
Yeah, and
Okay,
Eric,
we've worked them before. Good enough.
Yes.
Eric, if I could just make a comment, I've worked with several of these Elder and Mackinac and such, and they've done a lot of that grubbing and tree clearing prior to doing the dirt work. Just talked to one of them this morning about a job, and they are coming in so competitive because I asked them about that. They're saying it's an unbelievable year. Now's the time to do it. Last year was so dry that they got through all of their stuff, these earth companies, and they're just looking for work. So they're coming in hungry with their pricing, which is good for us, but familiar with those two companies very well. And I think we're lucky that they had a great dry year last year. Those are where they're coming in so low on their dollars.
Thanks, Michael. Move
Yep.
approval.
Your Honor, if I may interject, just procedurally, I think I want to make sure that I understand where we are at. And what we have done so far is moved approval of the agenda with polling AO. I don't know that this particular AO was up for an action item yet. And instead, perhaps we clarify, Your Honor, if that's.
Well, that's a great point, Counsel. We were really at the point of the agenda of just approving the agenda. We really had not gotten down to the consent items yet, which is really the time to pull the item. Should have caught that earlier. So procedurally, you're correct.
Your Honor, if I may make a recommendation, Mr. Klein, Councilmember Klein, your motion is pending. Perhaps you could withdraw your
Yeah, I
motion.
will withdraw my motion. My question's been answered. So go ahead. I'll withdraw my motion. We'll move forward.
So I think where we are now, Your Honor, is we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda, and then it sounds like it was friendly amended to pull AO, but I don't know that we incorporated that in the motion. You know, we're all off because Councilmember Edwards was late. Let's just all be real.
I think it was
Thank
actually
you so much.
just a technical difficulty on staff's part. I don't think Councilman Edwards is actually late.
Okay, everyone. So we really at that point in time, we voted to approve the agenda.
As drafted and published, yes, Your Honor. So we're ready to.
I trust that passed 4-0. I don't think John was on quite yet.
We haven't voted yet.
It was a voice vote.
It was a voice vote.
Oh, that one. Okay, because I've got approval on, okay, I've got it up on my
We haven't
iPad.
gotten down to consent items yet where we have you vote electronically. So
Well, I was a yes on that as well.
So it
John,
sounds like, Your Honor, we have approval of the agenda and ready for citizen presentation. Sorry to interject.
thank you. Okay, now we'll move to citizens presentation. This is where anyone joining us in the meeting can take a moment to address the council on an item that is not currently on the agenda this evening. If there's anyone here to do that, please make yourself known to Pete and he can connect with you so we can get your audio going.
Thank you, Your Honors. For folks who want to participate, you can click on the participant tab in the black bar with icons at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Once you do that, you should see a small window that opens up with a button that says raise hand. If you're participating by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and I can bring you into the meeting. Mayor, I do not see any hands going up.
Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to presentations now. We have a couple of presentations this evening. The first is some appreciation for city board and commission members, and certainly recognition for some of those who are transitioning off of boards and commissions. And we're always so appreciative of the work that that these fine citizens do for us. These are very, very important. I think we all know that and understand it. And each of the folks that are going to be recognized this evening have served our community for multiple years and multiple terms, and for that we're so grateful for that. So Doug, I'm going to have you, Doug and Richard rather, I'm going to have you start with the recognitions.
Yes, thank you. We have 3 members tonight that have come to the point of conclusion for their service on our boards. We've got the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, and a BCAB member as well. And again, similar to your comments, Mayor, we certainly appreciate all of their hard work during their time on the board. Some of them have been a somewhat short time period in terms of one term. Some have been on the boards for quite a number of years and have termed out, if you will. So again, just from staff's perspective, we very much value the input from our citizens. Certainly helps the process, from our opinion, in terms of being able to provide good quality recommendations to the city council on our development projects and on our other property owner issues when it comes to variances and building code matters. So again, we just express our appreciation and hope that we'll have the opportunity to potentially work with those members again in the future on some other planning project, or potentially even on another board appointment in the future.
Thank you, Doug. And just to be a little more specific, Terry Harrington, the Building Code and Appeals Board. On the Board of Adjustment, Jill Miller, who served multiple terms, and on Planning and Zoning Commission, David Kading, who we actually brought back, who went away, and then we brought him back in a time of need to help guide us in our activities. Doug, anything else on these?
That's it for community development.
Okay, thank you, Doug, and much appreciation to those members. Richard.
Thank you, Mayor. Across the 3 boards and commissions that Leisure Services oversees and is liaison to, we had a total of 5 members that are terming off due to no longer being able to re-up for another term. On the library board, we had 2 outgoing members. Chair Rebecca Papian served 2 full terms, as well as Vice Chair Larry Deutsch served 2 full terms. They were very valuable members of the library board and really appreciated the time that they gave and the sage advice that they gave to the staff, and really helped us out to make sure that we have such a high quality library that we do. On the Parks and Recreation Board, we had 1 member terming out due to serving 2 terms. David Bell served 2 full terms on the board. He will be missed. He was the chair when his term ended. And a couple of things that he's kind of been there through. He's there for the Greenbelt Master Plan, as well as the kickoff of these Greenbelt Triad projects. So his advice will be missed as well through this whole process. And then finally, on the Public Art Advisory Commission, we have 2 outgoing members. We had Chair Michael Alowitz. He termed out, but I do believe he's staying on somewhere else in another board and commission in the city, as well as then Secretary Kathy Butler Klein also served 2 full terms. Really appreciate all the help and advice and selection for the Art Along the Trail projects and some of the other commission projects that we've had through public art. And just want to thank all 5 of them for the work that they did and really helped Leisure Services and the services they provide be the best they could possibly be.
Richard, thank you. And again, thank you to these members for their service, many nights and hours, I'm sure even outside of meetings, for providing assistance to us. Again, our heartfelt thanks go to you. Okay, we'll move to the second presentation, and we are blessed to have DART CEO Elizabeth Prosciutti join us this evening. Elizabeth, welcome. Thank you for being with us tonight, and I'll turn it to you.
Right, well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me the opportunity to provide you an update on DART this evening. We greatly appreciate the leadership of Councilmember McCoy, who serves as your DART Commissioner, and then Councilmember John Edwards, who serves as your alternate Commissioner. With me this evening is also Russ Trimble, and he would like to open us up this evening with a few words before I start with the formal presentation. And Pete, I was wondering if you could unmute him.
Yes, Councilman Trumbull, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Awesome. Honorable Mayor, Honorable Council, Ted, Michael, and Eric. Thank you for having me. You're lucky that my microphone was muted. Otherwise, I would have gotten you guys digs sooner than I'm able to right now. So, I'm sorry, just lost my, I'm seeing Elizabeth's presentation, but I'm not actually doing the presentation. Elizabeth's going to be doing that. Anyway, I just want to thank you all for having us here. It's an absolute honor to be here to be able to present to you. I want to start out by complimenting Elizabeth and the DART team. DART, when compared to other like transit agencies across the nation, is one of the most efficient, most effective transit agencies in the country. And Elizabeth and the staff are always working to be even more efficient, more effective every single day. And I've just been extremely impressed with the work that they do. Over the last year or so, in the name of efficiency and effectiveness and trying to better align cost and benefit for our member communities, the DART Commission and staff have done a lot of heavy lifting and have advanced a number of initiatives. I'm just going to go through really briefly a couple of those initiatives. Number one, we started what's called the Transit Optimization Study. We commissioned a study and hired a consultant to study innovative, creative ways to get people from point A to point B. We looked at things like Uber, Lyft, Zip cars, e-bikes, scooters, and a host of other forms of transportation. While we were embarking on that study, we also implemented a pilot project in Urbandale that we call the Flex Connect, where we're studying, where we basically used Uber and Yellow Cab and took out a bus and used Uber and Yellow Cab to get people from their homes to the closest bus stop. And doing this, again, took out a bus, saved taxpayers money, and it was an enhancement as well for the riders in that area that live in that zone. We also started right-sizing our buses. You know, we've got a lot of complaints about big buses with not so many people on them. So we've taken some of our 40-foot buses and we've converted those into 30-foot buses. We've done that with 5 buses. I think we have another 5 buses that are going to be on the way shortly, and we're going to be doing that a lot more in the future. We don't save a whole lot with that, but we do save a little bit on fuel efficiency and also a little bit on the cost of the vehicle. And, you know, having over 100 vehicles in the fleet and being able to convert a number of these, every little bit is going to count and it's going to all add up. The other thing we've done at DART is we've put in place a position review team. We have that in the city of West Des Moines as well. So if people leave through attrition, we have Elizabeth and her executive team that get together and discuss whether or not we need to bring these people back on. If we don't, then we're going to leave the position open. That will help us be more efficient, effective, save taxpayer dollars as well. And then, of course, last but not least, we engaged in discussion on the funding formula, which Elizabeth will walk you through in great detail. But this funding formula essentially takes into account population and level of service to better align cost and benefit for our member communities. And I think you're going to see that this is going to be a good thing for the city of Clive. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth. And again, thank you all for having me here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Russ. So I want to just remind you of DART services that you have in Clive. Also talk to you a little bit more in more detail on the transit optimization study, our property tax formula initiative, and then provide you an update on our bus operations and maintenance facility discussion that's been ongoing over the last year. And then also provide you just an update on some other initiatives going on here at DART. So just as a reminder, we have three main service categories: our fixed route service, which is your traditional service with a bus stop and schedule. We have our rideshare service, which is a van pool program, and that extends for about 100 miles outside of the metro. And it's really at its inception had been really focused on bringing people from rural communities into jobs in the metro. And while that is still a prominent part of the program, one of the things that we found most recently is really getting people from the metro out to rural employment centers. And we've been able to establish several large partnerships with that program over the last year, over the last couple of years. And then we have our paratransit service, which is really geared at getting those that either have a cognitive or a physical disability or just aren't able to use the fixed route, your traditional bus service, providing them mobility options to get to medical appointments and other activities in the community. And as we think about where we're putting our services, we have really been focused on getting people to jobs, medical appointments, and education. And I think one of the service changes we made last October one of the extensions or additions of service that we've made was an extension to the Wittern Group in Clive, which has been a huge success in our partnership with them. So the services that are in Clive, there are portions of a couple of our local routes, the Route 74, which services the university corridor and service, that's the service that we extended to the Wittern Group. And then the 74 also serves Clive between University Avenue and Hickman. And then the 72 services Clive along the University Avenue corridor between Valley West Mall and 60th Street. And then there's two express routes, the 92, which primarily services Hickman Road, and then the 93, which services 86th Street. And then there is paratransit service throughout the city of Clive as well. So our transit optimization study, which Russ mentioned, has been a huge initiative for us. It started last December and got put on pause due to the pandemic, but we have picked it up in earnest here over the last couple of months. And the goals of the study are really to optimize our existing service, to identify the evolving needs of the region from a transportation standpoint. So we are positioning ourselves for the future as we grow to 1 million people. And then evaluating other innovative and service delivery models, such as microtransit, where you use a vehicle and servicing a small area and leveraging technology, as well as first mile, last mile ride hailing services like our Uber pilot that we have in Urbandale. And so we'll continue to, through this process, continue to evaluate those where they might make sense in other parts of our service area. And then after all that analysis is done, our end result will hopefully be to develop a long-term vision for DART service within the metro. And so I talked about a couple of different things that we're piloting with our Uber pilot in Urbandale, with the ride hailing, and then our micro mobility with leveraging technology and providing shuttle services in specific areas. But we'll also be looking to expand where mobility hubs and where can we aggregate services and different sorts of mobility. So Russ had also mentioned car sharing or bike sharing. How do those come together? Where are there opportunities with thinking about how we invest in our corridors and providing good, solid transportation in those? And then, again, that evaluation of our existing services and whether they should stay in their current format or whether we use some of these new approaches in the future to provide that coverage and mobility in those areas if a fixed route service doesn't make sense. So lots of options, and we'll be continuing to evaluate that over the course of the next several months. And so we've done a lot of analysis to date. Where we're getting ready to head into is the stakeholder and public participation. And so we will be doing some public participation work in the spring, and then based on that feedback, working to develop recommendations, and then bringing back in the summer draft recommendations from which we would get public input from. And then again, hoping that that integrated mobility plan would be finalized in the fall and be able to be brought to the commission for approval by the end of next year. Some of the other projects we're working on, Russ mentioned our 30-foot vehicle fleet, 30-foot vehicle transition. We purchased 5 of those vehicles and put them into service this summer. The commission just approved the purchase of 5 additional ones, and we hope to have those in service here later this year. We also implemented and put into service our electric buses that we purchased. We have 7 of those. And so really excited about that. They're the first in Iowa, and we were able to partner with Mid-American Energy on that project. I mentioned earlier our Uber pilot and our Flex Connect program. And then we also, the commission approved our reduced fare pilot program back in November. And that is really to streamline access to transportation for those that may have barriers due to cost. And so trying to make it easier for people to access reduced fares and expanding the program for those that are either seeking food assistance as well as maybe receiving unemployment benefits. And so that pilot program goes through the end of June of 2021, and then the commission will be evaluating the success of it and determining whether it's something that we would continue to do moving forward. So over the last 12 months, we have been working on an update to our property tax formula. We started this process actually last November of 2019 with Scott Racker from the Robert D. and Billy Ray Center. He helped us conduct community interviews. You may remember that. We met with key community leaders, and then the commission embarked on a series of workshops to think about and reimagine what the property tax formula could be as we moved into the future. And so the DART's budget this year, or for FY21, is $36.9 million. As a refresher, the bulk of our revenues come from property taxes at 62.7%. And then we do generate over 20% of our revenue from fares and contracts. It's down a little bit this year due to COVID, but that 21% exceeds the industry average of 20%. So most transit systems across the country do not generate more than 20% of their revenue outside of fares and contracts. And then we do receive 11% of our funding from the federal government and 4.6% from the state. And then we do have a few other miscellaneous revenue sources. And as you can imagine, getting the buses out on the road every day, the bulk of our expenses really are salaries, wages, and fringes, and everything to get buses in service. So fuel and lubricants and repair parts and everything to keep the buses rolling. Here is a look at the current property tax rates for all of our member communities. They range from 54 cents in unincorporated Polk County to 95 cents in Windsor Heights, and Clive currently is at 66 cents. So the goals of the property tax formula initiative were to make sure that as we move forward with changing the formula, that the formula still continued to meet the regional intent of DART, and that it allowed for member communities to continue to find value in maintaining their membership, as well as providing flexibility for DART to meet the future needs of the community. So some of the values that were established as they worked through this process that I wanted to highlight was as they worked through this process to find consensus, that everyone understood that the end solution will not likely be a perfect solution for everyone, and that success is coming to agreement on a formula that aligns the cost and benefit to member communities and factors in the importance of regionality and how people travel. And so the bulk of the workshops that were conducted were really to hone in and establish principles for the formula. And so The commission did establish 7 principles, the first being long-term viability, the second, that there was predictability to the formula, third, that there's transparency, fourth, that there was a regional mindset to the formula, fifth, that there was equity within the formula for member communities, the sixth principle is that there was a base level of support, and the seventh principle was that the formula sought to be creative in how we developed it. And so there were a variety of formula options that were examined, five of them specifically, and then there were a variety of iterations that we looked at within each one. The first formula option we looked at was having a flat rate based on taxable valuations. So every community would pay the same levy rate. That did not meet all of our principles, and so that was not considered for further evaluation. The second was that there was a base buy-in of support, so everybody would pay the same amount going in, and then there would be an allocation for service. The third was establishing the formula totally on population. Then the fourth option was to establish the formula totally based on service with no regard for any other factors. And then the fifth option, which is what resonated with the commission and was moved forth and we looked at in more depth, was handling and assigning costs to the city of Des Moines. And then all of the suburban member communities would be assessed based on population and service tiers. And so here is what the preferred formula option looks like. It takes the total number of dollars that DART needs from property taxes on an annual basis and assigns 49.2% of that total amount to the city of Des Moines. And that 49.2 accounts for the service that is really totally benefits the city of Des Moines. The bulk of our service at some point runs through the city of Des Moines, and that there was a recognition amongst the commission that there is a shared benefit for a lot of our services with our suburban member communities. And so we worked through kind of what that allocation should be, and 49.2 is what was established. And so the remaining amount of property tax dollars that 50.8% would then be assessed 50% based on population, and then 50% based on the service tier that each member community fell into. And so you'll see that there's 4 service tiers within that. And so the first tier West Des Moines. That next tier is Altoona and Windsor Heights with limited 7-day-a-week service. The next tier is primarily 5-day-a-week express service, and that's where Ankeny, Clive, Johnson, and Urbandale fit into. And then the last tier is communities that have limited amounts of trips, paratransit, or mobility on demand, and that includes Bondurant, Grimes, Pleasant Hill, and Polk County. And then here is a representation of all of our member communities and the percent that each community pays into the total amount of property taxes that are collected. You'll see here that Clive currently pays 4.7% of DART's total amount of property taxes that are collected, and under the new formula, Clive would go to 2.2%. So this would be a property tax reduction for the city of Clive for its residents. There were some other communities that did see a significant increase. The first being the city of Des Moines, which went from 35.3% to 49.2%. And then West Des Moines also saw an increase going from 19.5% to 21.6% of the total bill. And so how the formula will be applied is that we allocate the total amount to the city of Des Moines based on the formula. So that 49.2%, and then that 50.8%, which will be spread amongst our other member communities. 50% will be based on population and 50% will be based on that service tier. There is still the cap on the DART levy of 95 cents. So in order for a community to exceed 95 cents, there will need to be state legislative action. And so at this juncture, any city that falls above that where we would need to levy more than 95 cents, they will be paying DART directly for that amount over. Given the amount of the large increase that the city of Des Moines will see with the changes in this formula, they did have some requests as we worked with them on the formula. And so their first request was to phase in the new formula over 8 years rather than 5 years. It will be a significant increase for them, and so being able to manage that. And then the second was really thinking about what the long-term viability and the long-term funding mechanism for DART should be. And so they requested that DART really reconsider our request at the legislature for increasing the property tax cap. And instead of doing that, really focusing all of our legislative energy on finding another funding source to either replace or supplement property taxes, and really allowing for some additional diversification or finding a funding source that that could replace the property taxes in full. And so so because of this, the city of Des Moines agreed to support the new formula by buying down their levy rate for the first 3 years, because their new rate will exceed that 95 cents, with the hope that we'll be able to find a funding source that would be able to diversify or supplement, replace or supplement our property taxes here with the legislature in the next couple of years. And so this is what the phase-in looks like with our budget year in FY22, the budget that we're currently developing. 10% of a member community's levy rate would be based on the new formula, and the remaining 90% would be based on the old formula, and then it would grow incrementally every year, with a larger percentage being based on the new formula until you get to 8 years out, where there would be 100% based on the new formula. And so this is what the property tax rates begin to look like as we project out over that 8-year time frame. And again, the city of Clive is at 66 cents today. It would drop here. We're projecting that it will drop here in the FY22 budget by a couple of pennies, and then continue to decrease over the next 8 years. You will see here the increase that we are projecting for the city of Des Moines, going up to over $1.50 in that 8-year period if we're not able to find a funding diversification mechanism to assist DART. So our next steps on the formula, we've been meeting with all of our member communities. You are our last presentation in this regard. We will be bringing forth a recommendation for the commission to approve the new formula at their February meeting. Assuming that they approve that, then our FY22 budget would be based on that first year of implementation, with 10% being based on the new formula and 90% being based on the old formula. And we would anticipate most of our member communities seeing some sort of property tax reduction here in that first year as we transition. Any questions on the property tax formula?
Yeah, I have a couple, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So we have a 95-cent cap per the state law. Is that right, Elizabeth?
Yep.
And so based off the projections, Des Moines gets significantly higher than that, right?
Correct.
So this formula can only work if the legislature makes a change, no?
No, so as I said, the city of Des Moines is planning to buy their levy down or to pay that increment above the 95 cents.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. I didn't understand that connection there. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
And then does the formula ever adjust, or is that just in perpetuity? I mean, is there any adjustments over a certain period of time, or?
What are you referring to in terms of adjustment?
I don't know. I mean, is it a?
Yes, it does, Ted. We're going to be looking at population and service level. What, Elizabeth? Do we decide every 1 year, every 2 years to recalculate?
Okay.
We'll refresh the population numbers as soon as we're using the census numbers, and so as those the ACS survey numbers, and so as those adjust, then those would change, and then if a member community changed service tier levels, then that would also
Gotcha.
Recalibrate it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
The other thing I would add that could recalibrate this is that we do plan on having conversations with both Norwalk and Waukee once we get everything kind of situated and settled, and try to bring them into DART as well. We think that it would be very beneficial to have them become members of DART, and you know, if they come in, then you know the formula would stay the same, but the amount that I think we all pay would go down.
Right.
So.
And that was a question I had for later down the line. So I appreciate that. Yeah, Russ, I think the important thing that we can all agree on is that the amount that's being charged to West Des Moines goes up over time. So that's a good thing.
Taking one for the team.
Hey, if I may, back to the Des Moines buy down piece of it. That's so they're buying down 3 years. What happens at the end of 3 years? Then maybe I missed that part of it.
Well, we're hopeful that we'll have some level of success with the legislature and allowing us to pursue some other options. If we're not successful, then you know we'd either have to pursue an adjustment to the cap to allow for them to levy above that 95 cents, or work with them to pay above, continue to buy that down or pay that increment above.
Elizabeth, do you have those efforts underway with the legislature now?
We do.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth, a significant component of the plan is developing alternate source of revenues in the future. Could you expand a little bit on what you're looking at and what you folks are thinking of pursuing those alternate source of revenue?
Yeah, so we have been looking at sales tax as a potential option. We've evaluated hotel motel fees, rental car fees, income tax, parking taxes, vehicle registration fees. There's a whole host that we've done some modeling on in that regard, and so we've had some member meetings with the Polk County delegation. We'll be having some more starting next week to kind of feel out what makes sense and what could they support. And we'll be going from there.
Other questions for Elizabeth or Russ, council? Michael, John, anything, any comments that you'd like to make?
I do. You know, Russ joked about taking one for the team, and I'd say, you know, he can kind of laugh, but he did. And with his negotiations, it really turned this thing. So DART staff has done a great job in the last several years that I've been on this. It started with a governance change. That was a giant lift. And once the governance change happened, it opened the door for this formula change. And, you know, we have the right leaders, it seems like, at the right time in some places. And Russ has been there for last year as well as this year. Believe me, this is harder than even complimenting Weaver, is to compliment Russ Trimble. And his team, you know, he's the chair. He was voted to be chair again next year. And it's quite a diverse and pretty cool group that is the executive board. You've got Doug Elrod as the vice chair from Bondurant, and Josh Mandelbaum from Des Moines as the secretary, Paula Dierenfeld from Johnston at large, and Pleasant Hill at large with Ross Gruters. And so it's a pretty diverse group when it comes to cities. And Russ has really pushed, this agenda of change for the last year, and has done a great job of balancing, really getting Des Moines to the table and agreeing to this. And so it was, a no-brainer to put him in for another year to finish this thing up. So again, it hurts to say that Russ did a nice job, but he has done a great job with this board, and I see a lot better things coming, and we're righting the ship. And so well done to Dart, and well done to Russ and the rest of the commission.
Michael, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I don't take compliments well. I do better when you rip me, but I really appreciate it. And, couldn't have done it without you. Couldn't have done it without John as the alternate. As you said, it's a diverse group on the executive committee. It's really quite a diverse group of commissioners, and they're just a lot of great people who work to be as fair and reasonable as they possibly could in developing this formula, in spite of what it may have meant for their communities individually. And, I just can't thank you enough, can't thank John enough. Really appreciate everything you guys have done to get us to this point. So thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Elizabeth, do you have more?
Yep, just a couple more. Just want to give you an update on our operations and maintenance facility. Our current facility is located at 1100 Dart Way, which is off of Southwest 9th Street behind the BP station. We have been examining over the last year how best to proceed. It is the facility is past its useful life. It's located in the floodplain. It's landlocked amidst a really growing residential development here in the city of Des Moines. It needs a lot of repair in terms of its major mechanical systems. They all need to be replaced. The facility has been totally underwater a couple of times, and you can see there off to the side of the screen a picture of the tunnels. The water, with any water event, those tunnels collect with water, and that's where all of our major mechanical systems are for the facility. It's also undersized from door openings. So buses have gotten larger since the facility was built in the mid-70s, we can no longer, we can't widen the doors any further or make them any taller to fit in some of our newer vehicles. And so our main storage facility, which you can see in the picture at the bottom, our new electric buses will not fit through those doors. And so really need to think about what's the best way to move this facility forward and think about the future. And so we did a facility assessment about 18 months ago to look at the costs that that would be associated with continuing to repair our existing facility, along with the cost of looking at whether we should look at building a new facility. And so the commission is continuing those conversations and continuing to evaluate what is the best path forward. But wanted to make sure that you were aware of those discussions and thinking about whether they, about which path would be best for DART as we think about the long term. And then just lastly, just want to remind you that we are working to be as efficient and as effective as possible and wanting to be responsive to our member communities. And then continuing to always leverage technology and explore sustainable funding options as we look to the future. And so look forward to working with all of you as we move forward to the next phase of our transit optimization study and garnering public input and working with your staff to get the information out and get good representation from Clive, and so we can incorporate that into our study. And we look forward to continuing to serve the region as we grow to 1 million people and making sure that we have the most appropriate mobility options out there to serve our residents. So with that, I'll take any other questions you might have, and thank you again for your time this evening.
Elizabeth, one comes to mind on the maintenance facility. Is that number already baked into this formula? Or where does that fall within the funding parameter?
It is not baked into the projections. So it would be, depending on which option the commission moves forward with, there may be a small incremental increase, but it would be fairly marginal for each community. Let me back up. So it isn't baked into kind of the formula allocation in our projections, but any additional costs, regardless of the option of whether the commission decides to rehab the existing facility or build a new one, those additional costs would flow through the new formula. So from an allocation standpoint.
Okay.
And I think the range, Elizabeth, do you remember the range that the different communities would pay? Was it somewhere from 2 cents?
Less than a penny to 3 cents total, I think, or 3.5 cents.
Yeah, so I'm assuming Clive is going to be in that area of 2 to 3 cents or somewhere in there would be added back essentially.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, other questions for Elizabeth or Russ?
Elizabeth, can you give me a little bit more explanation on that kind of first mile, last mile thing? I'm pretty excited about that. I like to, how does that work exactly?
So so we have that in Urbandale with our Flex Connect zone. And so if you live within that zone, you can call an Uber or a yellow cab, and then they will take you to a bus stop within that zone. So the primary transfer points within that would be Gloria Day, Merle Hay Mall, or the ice arena there at on Hickman. And so it's really to connect people in that residential area to our bus services.
Sure.
We are looking at a similar service there in replacing another service in Urbandale with that zone here in the next several months.
Sure. So if I'm an end consumer though, I mean, is that like is that an additional cost? Is that included in my bus fare? How does that work?
So the Uber trip is DART pays for, and then they have to pay their bus fare when they get on the DART service.
Okay. So I just want to make a quick comment that, you know, this has been a great update. I really appreciate that both you and Russ being here. You know, where DART started when you came on versus where it's at now is just night and day. So your leadership has just been tremendous. And, you know, I got to believe that coming up with that new formula had to be a huge lift, and you know, bringing all those different parties together to come to agreement had to be incredibly challenging. And so just a great job by both you and Russ and the committee for doing all that. And I won't throw McCoy's name in there, but.
Thank you, Ted. I appreciate it.
You know what, I've got to agree with everything Ted just said. From where this started to where it is now, I'm pretty impressed with what I'm seeing here. And so I'm just thankful and grateful to the two of you and the entire team for the work, as Ted said, heavy lifting that's had to occur to make something like this happen, because this looks pretty good. So thank you. Other council member questions or comments?
Well, Mr. Mayor, you just said you agree with everything Ted said, and he said he excluded me from that. So I appreciate the comments.
Well, I'll make a friendly amendment on that one. So
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, very good. Well, Elizabeth and Russ, thank you for being here. We appreciate the very comprehensive, thorough update and positive update, I believe. So thank you, and God bless you in your work.
Well,
We appreciate
God
it.
bless you, and thanks for having us again. And again, we really appreciate all the work that Michael does and John when he's not there. So thank you so much for having us, and you guys have a great rest of your meeting.
all right, thank
We will.
you.
We will. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, very good. Now we will move to consent items. Take a
Move
motion.
approval.
Second.
That's moved by John, seconded by Eric. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And that item passes 5-0. So I'm going to get this out of the way there. 5-0. Thank you, council. Okay, now we'll move to action items. The first is a public hearing regarding the Emerald Isle rezoning. And Matthew, did we publish appropriate public notice?
Yes, Your Honor, that was published December 30th, 2020 in the Des Moines Register.
Thank you, Matthew. Amanda.
Mayor, Council, good evening. As you had said, we were supposed to have a public hearing tonight for the rezoning from R1 to PUD to allow for a townhome development over on Emerald Isle Drive, just a little north of Hickman Road. The applicant and developer has requested that public hearing be continued. They came up against some challenges with how to run utilities that may impact the overall site layout. So they requested some additional time to work through those details. Planning and Zoning Commission did not consider the application at their meeting in in January. So they can consider whatever the final layout would be at their meeting in February. So with that, staff would recommend that we simply continue the public hearing to your first meeting in February, which would be February 11th, to give them time to work through those issues.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
It's moved by John, seconded by Ted. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? It passes 5-0 to continue the public hearing. Okay, action item number 2 is a resolution approving the First Amendment to zoning change and development agreement, Shadow Creek North. Amanda.
Yes, as you had said, we have a First Amendment to the zoning change and development agreement for the Shadow Creek North development. This amendment, I think you can all hopefully see my screen here, shows the impacts the area in blue here. And what the intent of the agreement is to allow what staff is considering really a pilot project for some smaller lot, single family homes. These lots would be around 55 foot in frontage along the street, except at the corners, those have maintained a larger lot size in order to accommodate our secondary front yard requirements. So with that, the homes will be slightly smaller than what you find in some of the other Shadow Creek development to the south, but they're still comparable in size to what our townhome minimums are, with a 1-story having a minimum in this agreement of 1,150 square feet and a 2-story having a minimum square footage of 1,400 square feet. All of the home examples that we've been provided also include basements. So that basement area would not be included in those square footages. So that'd be additional finishable space for those. The differences from the single family homes that you might find to the south, that you're likely to see, are the amendment reduces the attached garage requirement from 3 cars down to 2 cars, and then lessens that side yard setback to around 5 feet rather than the 7 or 8 that we require further down. We do think from a financial analysis standpoint that this will perform comparably to either a single family or a townhome development. Given the size of the lots being slightly smaller, they can construct more homes in the same space. So that's why the taxes end up being pretty comparable between the smaller lot single family and the slightly larger lot single family. The agreement is structured to be flexible. The developer of the subdivision has not come to a full agreement with the builder of the homes that they'd like to work with. This was one of the steps in that process to allow them to do that. So the agreement is flexible right now, that they wouldn't be required to develop this blue area with the smaller homes. So they could opt to, when they come to plat it and do the site plan approval, to do just the standard single family homes like you see in this area that is being graded right now for construction. Or it could be townhomes or the mixed residential uses. Since this was on the original agreement, this blue area was part of the green mixed residential. So that area can still be a flex space for them. So with that, I'll let you guys ask me questions if you'd like to, and staff would recommend approval of the development agreement.
Thanks, Amanda. Questions, council?
Amanda, what's the price point of those homes they're looking at with this development?
Sure. So they're probably going to be around $300,000 with our lot prices being a little higher. Some of their kind of entry ones that wouldn't have some upgraded fixtures and basements and such in our surrounding communities are starting around 250. That would be a challenge in Clive just because the lot prices out there are a little higher. So we anticipate around 300 on up, basically, once people finish basements and add some of those upgrades that we typically see in this area.
Move the resolution.
Second.
I do have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'm sure just a second here. It's moved by John, seconded by Eric. Discussion, Michael?
Yeah, it seems like just a couple years ago, the argument was going the other way in this area about garages, and that we were pushing so hard for 3-car garages, not just in this area, but for other areas of the community to build 3-car garages, even like in my neighborhood where you have the space in between houses. But, I think we heard from some of the developers as well as Ted at that time that 3-car garages were an absolute must, in the market and for this area. Has that just changed? Because I'm hearing more and more that, we're going to this 2-car. Is that for convenience, or is that the markets have truly changed that much?
Yeah, Amanda, let me, if I could, and I'd like to take that if I could.
Sure.
Yeah, Mike, it's a good question, but we are seeing around the metro a lot of the builders trying to hit a lower price point, more of the first-time home buyer entry market for new construction. We're seeing that more and more, and the ones that are being built are selling like crazy. And in order to hit that price point, you do have to go down to 2-car garages. In the past, new construction was designed more for the move-up buyer, if you will. But many of the builders around town are trying to cater more to that first-time home buyer. A lot of that is driven by the lack of inventory that's out there, even in the resale market. And so they're trying to fit to meet that demand in that first-time home buyer market. So we are seeing, for the first time here in the last year or so, new construction homes being built in the mid 200s. And that never existed before. I mean, you had to go to a townhome to do that. And so I do think that this would be a very good project for Clive. It maybe not quite fits that definition of affordable housing, but it gets us off a lot closer than what we had been when we're talking about new construction homes. So I'm very much in support of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Amanda, did you have anything to mention on that question?
I don't know that I can put it much more eloquently than Councilman Weaver did, other than just we don't have anywhere else in our newer development that is offering this kind of product in Clive. We are seeing it in some of our surrounding communities. So I think Councilman Weaver kind of hit the nail on the head there, and I would agree with his comments.
Well, and so really what this is it's a flexibility plan for the developer. It's not like they may or may not do this, right? They may continue to do what we had planned earlier, just depending on what the market's doing, it sounds like. Is that fair?
Yes, yes. And right now, the way it is structured is these smaller lot single family could only be built in the blue area. So if they get that built and it's very successful and they want to expand that area, we could come back and amend it, the development agreement again to allow additional space to utilize that smaller concept. But it didn't just release the remaining unplatted land for that concept. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other discussion on this item?
Yes, I have a question. Can you speak to the plans for stormwater with this increased density?
Yes, sorry, my dog was going off in the background there. So the language in the agreement's a little complicated dealing with the landscape buffer and open space area. Previously, the language required it in this area where my mouse is. And you can still see they have the detention called out here. So this space is maintained that could be used for detention, but the language now is structured simply shifts that landscape and open space to wherever that new boundary ends up being between single family homes and townhomes or apartment or whatever would be built in the mixed residential. So ultimately, if they end up using this blue area as the green mixed residential, that language would stay that the landscape and open space buffer would go here. If it shifts up, it would move. That's similar to how it was structured before, just had to be adjusted a little bit. So the long roundabout way to answer your question is we are anticipating that in that open space and buffer will be some of that, that stormwater management. The increase in density here is not very significant from the traditional single family. I think it was around 5.2 units per acre on the pink and yellow areas, and we're around 6 units per acre in the blue. So it's not a substantial change in that impervious surface, and shouldn't have a significant impact on the stormwater versus what would have been installed with the development anyway.
So there isn't any increased detention requirement being at the 6 versus the 5.2?
Well, this portion up here has not had the full construction drawings done yet or the preliminary plat. So it will have some level of impact on it, but it should be a relatively small adjustment that would just be captured in the planning and platting process for that. But it shouldn't have a large impact on what they would have had to install.
Okay.
Other questions on this one, council? It's been moved and seconded. We're in discussion. Seeing none, will the council please vote? And that item passes 5-0. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to action item number 3 now. This is regarding Lanand Park mini pitch system. There's 2 resolutions that are associated with this. Richard?
Thank you, Mayor. What you have before you tonight is the main item regarding one of your strategic plan items, which would be short-term improvements to Lanand Park to show an investment by the city to improve that park ahead of larger redevelopment of Lanand Park, following up the neighborhood planning work as part of the 86th Street neighborhoods plan. So what we've done is try to figure out what would be the best way to do that short-term improvement without having to know what the final master plan would be for Lanand Park. And so the largest item we have here would be converting the existing tennis courts there just north of the public safety building to 2 mini pitch courts, which is essentially small soccer fields on a hard surface with a little bit of a smaller ball. We also are proposing to remove the old wading pool and restore the grass there until we know what's going to happen with the larger park. And also the other main element of it would be cleaning up some of the landscape out there. There's some overgrown shrubs. There's a few trees that separate the park from the apartments to the east that we're seeing a ton of people move back and forth through that area, so much so that maybe taking a couple trees out between that area there would actually open up and create ability for people to get through there easier. Right now, they're kind of pushing through the large pine trees there. So those 3 things in combination, we believe are the appropriate short-term improvements to the park that can be done and finished up by early this summer. The key one that you have the item here before is a resolution. It's a donation and construction agreement with Kick It Forward, which is an organization that seeks to get these mini pitch courts installed in different cities. It works to engage kids in better life skills, athletic endeavors, and just being overall good humans that are really enjoying soccer out there. And also approving a purchase agreement with Musco Lighting to purchase the mini pitch system from them. In total, the system's about $130,000 to $135,000 system. So the purchase or the construction and donation agreement represents about a $40,000 donation to the city to help get this off the ground. We're looking forward to the opportunity to do this and think it'd be a really, really popular activity out there. We worked with Opportunity on Deck, which does a lot of programming in Lynn Ann Park every year, and they touch base with the school system. We also touch base with Amanda and Doug to see if this would be an appropriate fit for what we're seeing in the kids out there. And everyone concurred that this would be a great opportunity to convert those tennis courts into that mini pitch system. It's something that we can get done this spring and really get going here probably by the early part of the summer. So you have the two resolutions in front of you. The first is the donation and construction agreement. Should that be approved, then it would be approving the purchase agreement where we can get ordered of that mini pitch system for Lynn Ann Park. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions, council?
I do, of course. We're 45,000, I think it is a offsetting the price from the purchase price to where it was without the donation. And how long does this ownership of kind of the programming and the naming and all that, how long does that last? Is there a date, 2, 3, 4 year?
So there will be no ownership of the programming for them. It would just be the naming of the court subject to city council approval at a later date. The city will have all ownership of the facility. The city will do all the programming out there and will maintain any access to that. There is no private control of that facility. It'd just be for the ability to put some signage up and at a later date approve a name of that facility.
Okay.
One thing I would note related to that too, we are working with, hoping to work with Kick It Forward, as well as a few others to put together some soccer or some football, some mini pitch leagues out there this summer. So we are going to work with them to find ways to start to get that programming out there and really get kids engaged out there even more so than they are now.
Sure. I mean, obviously this is a legal team question, but things like this wear out, right? And I don't know what the lifespan is. They put their name on it. It starts, needing maintenance and parts and, redoing it, whatever it is, the paint of the logos and the lines and on and on. And so at some time, this has got to time out for a life, span of it. It's good for 3 years. It's good for 5 years. Sometimes you got to be careful of the donations because the donations will cost you more in the long run than it will. You see what I'm saying? So have something in here for there's another re-up in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or what have you. Otherwise, we're going to walk over there someday and maybe it looks like the tennis courts of today. And the original donation was in there and the next 135,000 square on the city. Has that been thought of? I'm totally for it. You know that. I mean, I think this is exciting for Lynn Ann Park. But I don't want it to be a drain on us over the next few years because a splash was put in there and now we look around, there's nobody around to help again.
Yeah, I can maybe try to answer a little bit about that, the long-term maintenance of the facility. The way we look at it, the long-term maintenance that we would have to incur out there really wouldn't be anything more than we would incur on a typical tennis court. We're going to want to make sure longer term that any cracks out there are filled, probably in a 10 to 20 year lifespan. We're going to probably want to repaint that. We might have to replace light bulbs occasionally, but overall these mini pitch courts they're solid steel that should last a very long time, and overall maintenance should be equivalent to or less than the tennis courts as they are now.
As they are now, they're like parking lots, but okay, I'll buy into it.
Well, and that's one of the things why we think this is a great fit, because what we're seeing out there in that neighborhood now is not really a lot of people wanting to play as much tennis, but seeing a ton of soccer. Most of the grass turf out there is worn out most of the time. from kids playing impromptu soccer games. We've actually see a lot of the time kids actually build and bring out their own soccer goals and put it in the park as well, because there's just not enough space for them to play the soccer they'd like to. So we think it's going to be very, very popular, especially compared to the current use of the tennis courts.
Richard, I think it's a great fit. I know we've had conversations about this, and as you just pointed out, demographically, it's really a nice fit for the park and the demographics of the neighborhood right there. I did have a question on the courts themselves.
Yeah,
we've got some logo of I think Kick It Forward, who have you, and then there's the Clive logo with the goat on it.
Yeah.
Are we planning on using the official Clive logo, or are we looking to use the goat on there? Because I think if we put the goat on there, that might be a bad idea.
We can put whatever logo the council wants us to put on there. That was something we just requested them to see what something like that might look like. But prior to getting the final thing out there, we're happy to put whatever city logo, whether it be the goats or the overall city logo.
I would recommend our official Clive logo on that.
I would recommend that was a bad idea of you with the comment, but I would recommend that we put something on there that they relate to and is fun. And a Clive logo for neighborhood kids means nothing. So just to have a Clive logo, to have it to say it's ours, to me means nothing. I think maybe the kids pick it, or, you know, whatever it is, but it's got to be fun. It's their park, you know, that type of thing. Yes, it can relate to Clive, you know, whether it be the goats or the whatever else, you know, like it or not, the goats got us through a hell of a time morale wise. And those kids haven't even probably been privy to what's happening with the goats, and they need to come over to that park and, you know, have a visit for a weekend or something. But again, you know, that Clive logo is boring to a kid playing soccer. But
well, my sense is the kid doesn't care what logo is on there. He's there to play a game with his friends and have a good time. My only concern is we spent a long time developing a tagline and a logo, and to be consistent with the branding that we have in Clive, to be consistent to put it on those courts. The kids aren't going to really care what's on there as long as they're going to play, but I look at it for consistency of branding from the city of Clive perspective.
One thing I would offer up is that there are multiple locations, not just on the courts itself, for signage. So there are signs abilities on the sides and the ends and the entrances. So there's abilities to put some of that signage in multiple different locations. So I think there's probably the ability to do both of those things and make them look in a very nice way. And I'd be happy to work it out with Kick It Forward and bring back a couple of different options or recommendations if that's what the council would like for consideration.
That seems like the best thing to do. We won't solve this one. It's a creative piece, and I appreciate the discussion, but perhaps we sidebar this particular aspect of it. And I agree we could have some fun with it. So let's look at some different ideas. And Richard, if you come back to us.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
I'd move the resolution with Kick It Forward.
Moved by John, seconded by Michael. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? That item passes 5-0.
And the second resolution approving the purchase agreement with Musco Lighting for $90,000.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Michael. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? That item passes 5-0. Richard, thank you. Looking forward to our logo discussions.
Yep, and you know, we're looking forward to kicking off, and we'll probably have a nice, you know, should COVID allow, a nice grand opening kind of ceremony out there, and we really get people excited and get going out there this summer.
Outstanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, action item number 4 is the second consideration of ordinance number 1097, amending ordinance number 1034 pertaining to CPI adjustments to compensation of mayor and council. Joyce, you have this one.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. This item on the agenda is for the second consideration of that ordinance to amend that CPI reference. We have received comments since the first reading, so my recommendation would proceed with the second.
Questions, council?
I'd move that ordinance number 1097, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
It's moved by Michael, seconded by Susan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? Item passes 5-0. Thank you, Joyce, and that's the second reading. Okay, action item number 5 is the second consideration of zoning ordinance number 1098 amendment, general regulations, and Jill.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the second consideration of the final draft update to Chapter 4 General Regulations of the zoning ordinance. There have been no changes or revisions since the first reading, so we recommend moving forward with the second consideration.
Thank you, Jill. Council, is there any questions?
Jill, have we got any feedback from the public, our developers, or any of our partners on these changes?
No, we have not.
I'd move that ordinance number 1098, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
Moved by Michael, seconded by Susan. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? Item passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move down to the final 2 discussion items of the meeting. The first one is regarding Northwest 128th Street and Walnut Creek Drive access review. Jim, I think you're going to lead us on this one.
Thank you, Mayor. As you recall, the residents of Diamond Ridge Townhomes and the villas at Woodlands Creek petitioned the council last September requesting that the city modify the existing median on 128th Street to allow for the westbound to southbound turning movement from Walnut Creek Drive onto Northwest 128th Street. Staff's analysis and report is included in your packet. That information was also forwarded to Carl Schauber, the lead petitioner and a resident of Diamond Ridge. Hopefully you had a chance to review the report. I'm just going to walk through it briefly now and touch on a few points of emphasis prior to opening things back up for further discussion. Feel free to jump in with any questions as we go through this. We first looked at the history of both the roadway out there and the adjacent development. 128th Street has been incrementally improved as development has occurred over the last 25 years. The last major project was in 2007 when 2 additional lanes and a second bridge over Walnut Creek were constructed in the existing right-of-way. Upon completion of this project, the new lanes provided 2 dedicated lanes for northbound traffic, and the existing lanes, which had previously handled traffic in both directions, now provided 2 dedicated lanes for southbound traffic. The directional traffic is separated by a raised 20-foot median with protected left turn lanes. The project also included the addition of traffic signals at Sunset Terrace and Woodlands Parkway. These are both 4-way intersections that cross over 128th Street. In addition, an unsignalized full median access point was provided at Lincoln Avenue. At that time, that was a T intersection from the west and lies approximately halfway between Sunset and Woodlands. 4 other intersections, including Walnut Creek Drive, which we're looking at tonight, and at least 2 private drives were limited to right-in, right-out access at the project conclusion. The history of the adjacent development of Diamond Ridge and the villas at Woodlands Creek, those areas have seen ongoing construction activity in several plats in the area beginning around 2002. Construction drawings at the time typically indicated the future expansion of Northwest 128th Street and ingress egress easements were planned for and included as needed in adjacent plats to provide access via 126th Street. 126th Street is the private drive that runs north-south and connects through the villas to Woodlands Parkway. The report also includes some aerial imagery so you can kind of take a look at how the area has developed over time. The next step was to take a look at some existing data out there. The DOT had some existing sources, one specifically related to traffic. The DOT count maps from the last 3 iteration cycles are included in the appendices, and not surprisingly, these numbers have continued to increase over time. We also need to keep in mind that there are some additional projects in the area. In the near term, some improvements at the Hickman Road intersection for capacity improvements, and a little further out, the I-3580 interchange reconstruction. Both of those projects would point to continued increases in expected traffic volumes. And again, with those projects in mind, staff feels that the time frame for seeing any leveling off of traffic projections in the area is still several years out. Crash data is also available from Iowa DOT. In this instance, that data was fairly unremarkable, which is good when you're talking about traffic data. Crash rates are low along the entire corridor. More specifically in the study area, both are well below national averages. We did jump into some quick analysis, and that analysis centered on access management principles. We were able to draw guidance from several resources, both state and federal. Access management principles basically state that regulation and control of access on a corridor is necessary to provide efficient and safe operation and to utilize the full potential for roadway investment. It looks to preserve capacity and increase safety. One access management principle that was looked at in greater detail is sight distance. Sight distance is the viewing distance needed to safely complete a desired movement. Again, in this case, that's the westbound to southbound movement from a stop position on Walnut Creek Drive. Variables included in the equation are the speed of the cross traffic and the time needed to complete the movement. The results of this analysis find that there is insufficient sight distance when looking to the north to safely complete the turning movement. The bridge in the southbound lanes is the obstacle or limiter when looking in this direction. As noted in the report, these same calculations were discussed and completed in conjunction with Iowa DOT staff back in prior to the 2007 project with the same results. I'm going to skip ahead to the conclusions and recommendations, and based on the analysis we've just discussed, staff does not recommend the addition of a median access point at this location because of the inadequate sight distance available to safely complete the requested movement. With that said, there are two, and while not recommended, there are two design alternatives included in the report, along with some conceptual costs to show what a median access point could look like at this location. To conclude, and as mentioned previously, a draft version of the report was provided to residents on December 29th. Carl Shawver is present tonight, and a copy of his email response to the report was also included in your packet. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or open things up for further discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Council, do we have questions for Jim?
You know, I've got a couple questions. First of all, Jim, a very comprehensive and thorough report. So great job on this. You did a lot of work on it, and I thought it's top quality work. You know, a couple of things. I went out and drove this to kind of get a real feel for what the current situation is. And I tell you, if you want to go south, you've got to, and you live in Diamond Ridge, you've got to go all the way up and curl around and on the private drive of 126. It really is a long way out of your way. And, you know, granted, it's a want, not a need from the petitioners. But, you know, until you really get out there and drive this to really realize that it's a significant distance. The second observation is that one of the things I think that we need to take into consideration is that the stoplights would be a natural stoppage of traffic on Walnut Ridge Drive, I believe it is. So that's going to be a natural disruptor or slowing down of traffic right there. You know, I agree that there is curves right in there. As I drove this, I tried to get a good idea on the sight lines. There's certainly some curves involved in there, both from the north and the south right there. You know, can that be overcome? Possibly. Would we be cutting it? Would it be cutting very close? Probably. But these are all, you know, considerations I think we need to take in.
Other comments or questions, council?
Yeah, I've got one or two. So I've sold a couple of the Diamond Ridge townhomes. They're one of my favorite townhomes in the metro. I just think they're, you know, a tremendous location and they're beautiful down there. The biggest issue with them is the access. And like Eric said, it can be painful, and certainly as a resident, I could see where it would be very inconvenient. Certainly giving directions to and fro for potential buyers, it can be difficult even. And then when you factor in all of the e-commerce delivery and all of the additional vehicles going through the community just to the south, you know, you're adding a lot of traffic there. So I was disappointed in the report. I mean, I'm not questioning the data. I'm just, you know, I was disappointed in the result because I was hopeful for those residents and homeowners who live in Diamond Ridge for a better outcome. Jim, I guess my question for you, and I know nothing about traffic engineering, so, you know, start with that, but and I hate the idea of adding stoplights, but if we did we look at the possibility of adding a stoplight there that could be synchronized with the one at Woodland Hill, so you're not caught by each one? You know, if you get caught by one, you're not hit by the second one. That would obviously be pretty frustrating for most vehicle operators, but if we could synchronize those, could we not add a stoplight at that intersection?
Well, again, I think you folks are familiar with implementing traffic signalization at intersections. And without having looked at that in great detail, I certainly don't think we'd meet any warrants for a signal at that location based on side road traffic, accidents, some of the other things that we've discussed. So again, when we're talking about access management in an arterial corridor like this, you are first looking at maintaining the through traffic and keeping that volume moving through there. So again, you know, something we could look at in further detail, but again, I think we've been through some signalization requests, and, you know, this would pale in comparison to, from a need standpoint, again, based on the side road approach traffic at a minimum.
You know, I've got to share some thoughts on this as well, because I appreciate what's being said, particularly from the residents' perspective, you know, and about how they have to ingress and egress from that development. Totally understand that. Couple of us were around when this was done, and three things really come to mind for me as it relates to this. And I'll first say that I'm really not in favor of a median cut here. First and foremost, from a safety perspective, I'm up and down that corridor quite a bit, and people aren't going 35 down that hill and at that corner. Number one, so that's northbound traffic that I have a concern with, and then you have sightline inhibitors and everything else that Jim talked about from the southbound traffic coming over the bridge and coming to that curb or that curve in the boulevard there. So I think there's some real safety concerns here for me. That's first and foremost. Secondly, and I think just as important, is that when this development was put together, it was put together with this in mind. It's not like this is the first time this has ever came up. This was baked into the development, ingress, egress, engineering of this development when it was done. So I guess that's the other thing. I think the third thing is, you know, there's an assumption that You know, that if in fact the council were interested in doing something here, who's going to pay for it? And I'm going to suggest that the city is not the entity that pays for it. Particularly if you tried to put a signalization there, then you're really looking at some costs. But honestly, I don't view those last two as really viable at all, because the first two trumped that last one. Safety and the development was put together this way, with this in mind. So I have to put those thoughts forward, and I guess then I would ask other council members if there's questions or.
Hey, Scott, can I jump in real quick on that?
Yeah.
And we can get to Susan and John and Mike if they have other comments, but just to answer your comments, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. I certainly agree that just a straight median cut with no signalization would not be safe, and I would not support that, because I don't think it's safe. And just knowing that intersection very well, I would not support that either. I guess my question, and maybe Jim, I don't know if you know this or not, but what the cost to add a signal there would be. And then to your point, Scott, maybe the city doesn't pay that. I don't know. I have no idea how much that would cost, but if that's something that could be spread up across all of those residents and we leave it to them, if this is important enough to them to do it, and we do a special assessment to distribute those costs because it's to their benefit. I agree. Maybe the rest of the residents of Clive shouldn't necessarily pay for that, but if this is important enough to them and it can be paid for by them by distributing it across all of the homeowners, let them make that decision.
Ted, I agree, and I don't want to directly debate, but I think that, again, I'm offering my opinions here. We could always find a way to pay for something, but I think back to Jim's points, and these are real basic fundamental points, is that a traffic light there, even if it's synchronized, wouldn't even come close to meeting the merits for signalization in other areas that we've looked at as being priority over the years. I mean, that's the first and foremost. I think there's just too many aspects to traffic operation and safety. And you've been down there, obviously at between 3:30 and 6:30 to experience that traffic. So we're just having discussion here, but I just think there's a lot to consider. But I do appreciate the residents' viewpoint here, and I understand it. Other questions, council?
And Ted, this is Jeff May, just real quick. If the warrants were met and it was something to go forward, the price of the signals alone are about $300,000 per intersection. With this location, you'd also have to look at some turning lanes and some other things like that, so cars weren't hanging out in the road trying to turn left into there or so forth. So it's not a cheap project. You're well over $500,000 probably by the time you get all that done, if not more.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Just as a quick estimate.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I had no idea it'd be that much.
Well, I would move that we receive and file the petition.
Second.
It's been moved by John, seconded by Michael, to receive and file the petition. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? Passes 5-0. Okay, thank you. Jim, thank you. Again, I think to Ted's point, very thorough, comprehensive report. And I think to our residents, the council and staff are giving this thorough consideration. And
Your Honor?
Yes.
The only thing I would add is to ask if anyone from the public is here, perhaps they'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, I was going to do that. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
So whether Mr. Shriver's here or any of the other residents from Diamond Ridge or anybody else that's interested in this topic, you've heard the council discussion, staff discussion. If you have comments that you'd like to make, please reach out to Pete so he can connect you with audio. Thank you.
Again, folks, if you're participating by phone, you just press *9 to raise your hand. Yes, Your Honor, we do have a participant who would like to join the meeting. One moment. And Carl, if that's you on the phone, hit *6 to unmute yourself. Carl, this is Pete. Can you hear me all right?
I can. Thank you, Council and Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this finding and report. I also would like to thank Jim for providing his courtesy copy of the report that was just discussed. I did provide some written comments, which I understand that you have a copy of, and I'm not going to go through that in its entirety, but I will highlight a couple paragraphs, and that is the citizens believe that this is a win-win-win situation, simply because southbound traffic, as Ted has indicated, has to maneuver through that S curve on 126th Street private. It's not a wide street, and you get a couple parked cars, and you get some pedestrian traffic, and you have to maneuver to Woodlands Avenue, and then you have to wait for the light to turn green off of Woodlands to turn southbound on 128th. And so this configuration actually reduces the traffic stoppage, because the traffic light at Woodlands Avenue would not operate as often to accommodate the southbound traffic from both the Woodlands and Diamond Ridge. The other thing that I would like to point out is that it really is a common sense solution. I'm sensitive to the safety aspect of the situation, but due to the fact that you got protected intersections, both north and south, Woodlands on the south and Hickman on the north, which provides a natural pause in that area, coupled with the fact that Walnut Creek Drive is the only ingress between those two controlled intersections. The Hickman light, the light at Hickman, does operate and does pause on a frequent basis, which would allow traffic to cross and merge into southbound 128th. And with that, I will only provide additional comments as council, and we're all here to represent the citizens, all citizens. I recognize your jobs are not always easy, but this is a simple improvement which provides a year-round improvement to a small block of taxpayers.
Well, Carl, thank you for that, and I appreciate your diligence. I'm sorry.
I want to add one. I want to add one more comment from the heart, and that is previous discussions on this meeting brought up a lot of accolades, which I certainly appreciate from having served on a citizens board many years ago. I know that you're probably an underappreciated group, but I will point out that it's the simple, hard-working, honest citizens with families who toil daily and pay their taxes, without question. Those are the true heroes. Without the citizens foundation, no community can have the improvements that have been discussed this evening. And I really think this is an opportunity for council to take to heart and show that, oh, we're listening to you. It's a simple improvement. And from a prioritization standpoint, recognizing that there was some street improvements done just not too far from this location this fall, and additional expenditures earmarked this evening on lighting, which will probably be used hours per year as opposed to every day of the year. I really think that this is an opportunity for the council to step up and say, we're listening.
Well, Carl, thank you again, and I
The
appreciate
location, again, I want to emphasize the comments on the traffic lights. There's no traffic light that's necessary. I drive this, several times daily, and due to the natural flow at Woodlands Avenue, what you got the traffic from the parks employees, again, that provides stoppage, and then the Hickman light. There's no need. There's absolutely no call for a stoplight, coupled with the number of people that are going to be using this benefit. So anyway, I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss this. I would encourage council to reach out to residents if they have additional discussion, and thank you for your time.
Carl, thanks for your time and for your diligence and your professional approach to this inquiry. And I think the council has listened, and probably will continue to listen. We've moved to receive and file the petition. I think that if there's, I haven't heard everybody weigh in on this necessarily tonight. So I guess if there's any other comments by the other council members, I'd like to hear them. So the staff has a firmer direction on where we're going with this. Or
Well,
not.
one question that crossed my mind, Mayor, is I do think there are times that the traffic is not heavy on that street. And I just wondered if there is the potential to limit a left-hand turn to times of day that we know it's relatively open. At least we could do that.
I would comment, Mr. Mayor, if that's what you're looking for. I agree with many of the comments here, but I would ask, the resident as well with Ted's question. This is a private area with private roads and was built, like you said, at some point with these rules put into place. They benefit from those, private roads and such. And so I think it would be reasonable to ask the resident if they all would come together and agree on paying that, if we were to even think about it on the lights. I think that's very reasonable. When we talk about the roads that were built other places, they're public roads and for paid by public dollars and assessments on those roads. And so they're kind of, in my eyes, apples and oranges when we compare the two. We do a lot of, and it is tough, as he said, to pick, some of these things, but when you're dealing, you can't change the rules in the mid-game. And I think that's what we'd be looking at doing for a small group to say, and this council asked for a detailed study, and staff took a lot of time and thought into this study, and it came back with a response that some of us may not care for, but it is kind of a scientific and well-studied finished product, and we need to listen to that. So to Ted's point, if we want to ask if they want to be assessed at $500,000, maybe we can go on, but I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not so sure safety would allow me to do it, and vote that way on that road to put those different options in there. So that's my 2 cents, kind of a long way around it, but it's a private deal. I think it needs to be dealt with privately and is not, unfortunately, a benefit of the whole, meaning the city. And so we need to come up with a different solution.
Matt, I'm going to ask you to weigh in as well with your thoughts.
Happy to, Your Honor. I think as I was been listening to the conversation and we heard from Carl representing the residents that they're not interested in a traffic signal at that location. Hearing the council discuss this, I think it was clear, at least there was support and recognition that anything other than a traffic signal is not a safe condition in this location. I think that kind of answers the question. At least from what I've been hearing, your discussions of, and the recommendation from the engineering staff of that even with the median cut, that even in non-busy traffic times, the sight distance and the angle of the street for that southbound traffic, especially if there's speeding traffic on less busy times on that roadway coming down that corridor, does not offer much time for somebody to turn and react and see a car coming. So with at least, and the council can correct me if I'm wrong in terms of not reflecting that discussion correctly, but with that said, and then the residents not interested in a traffic signal, it sounds like at least my recommendation would be, probably won't be a surprise, but to agree with the staff report and the engineering report that this isn't a recommended improvement at this time. But I would agree with you, Your Honor, that if the council did want to go down any kind of path of improvement, because this is benefiting a specific small number of residents, that the costs for such improvement should be borne by that small benefit that would see from this. And one other question, the item that hasn't been maybe discussed is as much, I know Jim hit on it a little bit in his comments, is if you created another conflict point, what does that do for the flow of 128th Street? And knowing that we've got increased traffic counts over time, we've got improvements planned next year, well, actually later this year to start to the north at Hickman. What would that do in terms of the increased traffic flow that we're going to have on 128th and creating another conflict point, potential for accidents along this corridor that wasn't previously planned? So that gives me a little pause as well in terms of additional safety concerns. But those are my comments, Your Honor.
Matt, thanks. Council, any other comments here before we call discussion? Okay, I think this has been thoroughly vetted. I'm going to call discussion at this point. The council's moved to receive and file the petition. I think if continued discussion ensues with the residents and with our staff to somehow find another amenable solution, I would always encourage that to continue. The exchange of ideas is always important. Communication is always important. But I think what's occurred tonight is basically a broad consensus that we not make the requested improvement here. So thank you all. Thank you, Carl, for your time. And we're going to move on to our last item of discussion, which is the FY 21-22 budget workshop number 1. Public Works Department road use tax and utility funds. We're just about 5 minutes to 8 or so. And what I'd like to do at this point, because we're going to have some more time, obviously, with the budget here, would be to call a 10-minute break for us to stretch. Let's get something to drink. If everybody comes back before that time, which would be 8:05, we'll regavel. So at this point, I'm going to move to recess until 8:05. Thank you.
Mayor, when you're ready to gavel back in, I'll just pull down that sign that's up right now.
Okay, we got about a minute.
Got it.
Okay, Pete. Okay, everyone, we'll reconvene the meeting of the Clive City Council. We're going to continue on now with our last discussion item of the meeting, which is the FY 2021-22 budget workshop. It's our first one regarding the Public Works Department road use tax and utility funds. Matt, start us off.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight, as the mayor mentioned, this is our first workshop for the 21-22 budget. As tradition, we start off with the Public Works Department budget, which really encompasses the road use tax fund and the 3 municipal utility funds that the city operates. And so we're going to do tonight through kind of a team effort here. Of course, Jeff and Joyce, as well as we have Suzanne from PFM, as we get to the utility cash flows here in a little bit. So jumping right in, there we go. Just as a quick reminder, this the financial strategy that we discussed last year during strategic planning. Just wanted to put kind of items related to the budget you will see tonight, or the budget components that you will see tonight, just as a reminder of some of the things that we're focusing on in terms of rate strategy, debt issuance, how we're doing capital funding and everything related to these funds, how some of these funds do support some general government activities, such as the city manager's office oversight of the funds, HR and IT and finance, providing support to the utilities and road use. And so just wanted to encompass that here in this slide. Then jumping in to the Public Works overview, and I'll have Jeff join me on this here in a minute, but what's on the slide here is basically the staffing structure of the department. As we note on the slide, we have some recent history here where some capacity expansion, particularly in the engineering division, where we're added a civil engineer and engineering inspection tech this 2 years ago. Or actually 1 fiscal year ago, and then an addition of a right-of-way operations specialist in the current year, which will have a big role in the MetroNet project that's underway in terms of the city's oversight of that private project and city right-of-ways. And then wanted to give Jeff an opportunity to talk about really, I would say, the major budget request for Public Works, and we'll have some more detail here when we get to the water utility, because that's where most of the cost is for this proposal. But to have him talk a little bit about this budget request for a promotional system and kind of a technical track for our operations specialist. Jeff, do you want to start off on that?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Mayor, Council, glad to be here tonight, and thank you for this opportunity. It's been a crazy year, and we're very fortunate to have a staff that's done a lot of put a lot of effort into the year and helped us keep up with things, with the challenges we have fallen a little bit behind. But in recognizing that, we look at one of our probably biggest challenges in the upcoming, and that's the staffing. And what do we do to maintain our staff? What do we do to provide opportunities for them? We have a very unique system where there's everyone is an operator specialist, don't have the opportunity to move to another position within our structure unless it's a supervisor or management type position. So as we look at that, we're looking to do something to create opportunities for them, something to help us, I guess, with our oversight of our infrastructure, and specifically our water department. We're required to have a grade 3 operator to operate our system. We had two of them. One was our previous Public Works Administrator who retired, leaving us with one. The other one at that time was our supervisor, who is planned to retire in July. We've since had one other operations specialist get their grade 3, so we do have one now. We have several working on it, but kind of put us in a situation where it came on unexpectedly. It shouldn't have been maybe as unexpected as it was, but it just realizing that this is happening suddenly. We didn't have a lot of people in place, and we haven't provided incentives for them to get it, other than maybe someday there'll be an opportunity. And so this system that we're looking at, and we'll talk in a little more detail later, is an opportunity to pay them for some grade pay. In other words, they get their licensing, they'll get a little extra money. Also looking at maybe some opportunities for them to be a senior position, whether someone has an interest in a specific area and not rotating, or maybe just doesn't have an interest in being a supervisor at some point, but really wants to pursue a technical in one certain specific area, the technical side of it. So we'll get a little bit more into that when we get to the spreadsheet that kind of shows that, and talk a little bit more about that. But basically, it's providing that opportunity. It's also a big benefit to us as far as the succession side, making sure that we have those licenses in place as they come up, and it also provides additional training for our staff, puts us in a better place to provide the service to the residents. You know, as we look at the long-term issues moving forward, keeping pace with growth, the year that we've had, it comes down to basically two things that we're looking at with what we're looking long-term. And one is long-term, and while it's long-term, it's also short-term. That's street maintenance and the rehab. As we look into those things, we've identified and spent a lot of time identifying all the street work that needs to be done. We started to execute. If you look at some of those things that have taken place and some of the projects that we finished Woodcrest and Westgate Bridge construction, Northwest 142nd lighting. We currently have in progress, if not finished up, the asphalt overlay project from the year, the residential patching project. Phase 1 of Clark Street got off to a bit of a slow start due to the COVID. We delayed them a little bit. Not that they may have got it all done, but we could have sure would have got a little bit more done if we could have got started a little sooner. That will be finished up next year. The Hickman adaptive traffic control should be going in here in the next few months. And we've just finished the sanitary sewer lining project for this year. And if you look in there, there's a lot of projects in design right now. Clark Street Phase 2 will be going out for bids here this week. We're actually going out tomorrow with bids coming back in. We're working on Harbach, Buffalo Road water main reinforcement, an overlay out of Meredith and Warrior Lane. More patching and more projects there that are listed in there. I won't get into all of them. Big thing is that, you know, from a standpoint, we're getting there. We're starting to produce. We recognize and appreciate the support of additional staff in the engineering department to accomplish this, and you're going to see those results. Not only we've started to see them, but you'll see them here in the upcoming years because our workload gets even bigger. One of the other things that Public Works has taken on is support of stormwater management. These projects that we do, we continue to do and work into our activities, into our schedules. The big one next year, Indian Hills Woods, we'll be spending a lot of time out there next winter, doing some stream bank stabilization and finishing that project, working on that project. Those are some of the things, I guess, long-term that we look at, but some of the things that also reflect what we're doing now because they're part of that long-term solution. When we get to the short term, and that goes to your succession planning, promotional opportunities, we have a slide for it coming up. You know, this is where that slide is, but it's back a little bit. We'll get to it here in a couple slides. So get a little more detail there, but one of the other things is ongoing equip training and certification. One of the important things from a safety standpoint and making ourselves better in the services we provide for the residents. And equipment, we've got a very good program and very fortunate to have the equipment replacement program we do. We keep up, we look at those things, we evaluate them on an annual basis and don't just buy them because they're due. We really try to make sure that it's the right time. Right time doesn't necessarily mean it's completely wore out. It means it's getting to the point where we might expect some more increased maintenance cost. And it also has some value as far as trading it off to minimize that annualized cost on an annual basis anyway. So the replacements this year, as you can see, we got the dump truck just about every year. There's one year that we don't, but we're not quite there yet. There's a backhoe breaker. That backhoe breaker will be going to the Parks Department. The asphalt and concrete trailers are both due. Variable message sign will be the last one. So they're all three up to the current standards, I guess, the more modern technology, I should say. They'll all be alike, so they all operate the same way. We'll also be looking at a mosquito sprayer, updating that, along with our annual traffic signal replacements and upgrades to this traffic signal system. And then we also have a 1-ton service truck that's scheduled for replacement this year. One new request in there is an engineering SUV for the right-of-way specialist. We looked at some of the vehicles and looked at an economical solution, but the need for that is with the addition of him and the build out of the fiber system in Clive next year, we need a vehicle for that person to be out in the field and stay on top of those operations. Matt, you want to roll it ahead one?
Yeah, so just looking at road use tax overall, just kind of the key issues with the fund summary that's included in your packet. Overall, revenue is pretty solid, and we've had some good growth over the last 4 years. We anticipate another jump in revenue here. We'll likely see that start in this current fiscal year, basically whenever this 2020 census results are certified. Hopefully the next couple of months will result in a bump because the road use tax is distributed to cities based on population. And so we anticipate a population bump there that will result in that revenue. And we foresee that that revenue increase will offset in this current fiscal year, will offset some of the losses that we had in the beginning of the fiscal year as we had some lingering effects from the pandemic in terms of less mileage driven in the state. And of course that filters down through the road use tax formula to cities and counties as well. But overall, as you see in the fund summary, pretty solid. You know, we are anticipating a little bit of a deficit in the current year, but as you know, many times the actual numbers when the fiscal year book is closed, and many times we never spend 100% of our budget. And so more than likely, we're hoping, we can't guarantee that that'll be in the positive mark because of some of the revenue losses early in the fiscal year. But as you see with our cash reserves and the road use tax fund, we're well positioned to weather that impact. So we're very comfortable with where we're at with this fund. Just some stats there in terms of expenditures. Of course, with road use, expenditures can vary from year to year, you know, depending on weather events, particularly snow, as I just heard one of our snowplows go by here, here at City Hall with the storm tonight. And so that can change from time to time. But overall, a fairly status quo budget with the one exception of what Jeff's already started on related to the promotional opportunities. The impact of the road use fund is fairly minimal. Most of it because of the need of water certifications. With our water distribution system, most of the cost, as we'll show here in a minute, under the water utility is borne by the water fund and a little bit in the sewer fund as well. Also wanted to mention that this continues the 50-50 split for street lighting expenses with the general fund. We anticipate continuing that with this proposed budget, not ready to anticipate or at least recommend any change at this time. So overall, stable in terms of where this fund is at, able to weather the storm that we had over the last year in terms of some uncertain revenues. But and that's part of the good fiscal planning that we've had for a number of years with this fund. So before we move on to any of the utilities, just wanted to see if there was any questions, Your Honor, or comments on the road use tax fund.
Council questions. I think that I think a good proposal on the promotional opportunities for our operations specialists to reclassify. You kind of you get to a point where people bump up against, you know, kind of the, what do I want to say? They go as far as they can go, and everybody has talent ranges and areas of expertise. And if they can continue to grow in their role, I want to be supportive of that if it's sustainable and fundable. So I'm very interested in that and appreciate the creativity with that thinking.
Appreciate that, Your Honor. That the staff retention is a big part of this strategy for us, as well as expanding the training and talent base of our staff.
Yeah, just one quick comment from myself here. I agree. And, you know, one of the things you bump up from these highly technical positions, especially with water, you know, a worker gets the ceiling right there. If there's no room to grow or no room to enhance themselves, they're going to look elsewhere. And those are hard positions to fill because they're very technical. So, you know, if we can provide opportunities for them, then, you know, obviously there's a cost to it, but the long-term cost of replacement is far greater.
Thank you, Councilmember Klein. I would totally agree on that.
I have a quick question, and that is, do we have some cushion or any consideration in case there's a continued downturn in 2021 from the ongoing pandemic? I know a lot of businesses I've been talking with are anticipating a really tough spring. So I'd like to hear about that.
Yes, in terms of the road use fund, we have built up a pretty good reserve in that fund, you know, 80-ish% to the point where it definitely allows us to weather these kinds of storms. And as we show in the proposed budget, we're actually proposing a budget that adds to the surplus. And so we're definitely being conservative with our expenditures and our revenues for this budget. Anticipate giving us flexibility if we do see any further effects from the pandemic that linger in this current fiscal year, and potentially even if it, hopefully this isn't the case, but in case it is, even into the fiscal year 2020. So we're very comfortable that we have sufficient reserves to combat any potential future revenue shortfalls.
Okay, Matt, let's keep going.
All right, moving on to the water utility, I will turn it over to Joyce, and I know Suzanne will also jump in on the cash flows too, and then Jeff and I will jump back in when we talk about the certification proposal. But Joyce?
Yeah, certainly. I think we'll open up our discussion and let Suzanne go through the water cash flow with us and the work that they've done on that with us.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be with you remotely tonight. As always, PFM did our annual financial review of the utilities. That includes looking at the proposed fiscal 22 budget, kind of where we are year to date in 21, and how we ended fiscal 20 based on audited financial performance. What we are talking about tonight is the fiscal 22 budget and sort of the main factors that go into our rate increase recommendation that we have before you tonight. Revenues were stable, I would say, over the last year. Sorry, clicking on my cash flow. We don't, you know, even with the COVID impact, we are predicting stable revenues for fiscal 22. And the expenditures, we are looking at a 15% increase from Des Moines Waterworks for the cost of the water purchased. And the cash flow also includes the capital projects that are going to be cash funded. There's no proposed GEO bonds or water revenue bonds to fund the capital investment in the water system. They'll all be cash funded. And they're part of the water main replacement projects. And the budget does include the $49,000 that has been discussed for the staff changes. Overall, with all of that taken into account, PFM is recommending a 3% water rate increase for fiscal 22, with an asterisk to reserve the right to look at sort of a tiered irrigation system. We're very much aware that irrigation has a large impact to the capacity for the city of Clive, and with the water regionalization discussion sort of continuing and not nearing completion, I don't think soon, there's just a lot to be determined, you know, based on the irrigation and the peaking factor that comes with that. I think it's a good thing that we are, taking the 15% water cost increase, funding capital projects with cash. We've been planning for this for a long time, and this is just a lot of good years worth of work and budgeting that's coming to fruition with just a 3% rate increase, which is what we had recommended last year.
Yeah, and as Suzanne mentioned that, I think it will be very important for us to really take a look at that tiered usage going back in the irrigation as we go through those regional discussions with Des Moines Waterworks, because it appears that their trend is going to be towards disincentivizing the peaking usage. So it will be beneficial for us to kind of get our arms around that as these discussions move forward on that.
And at that end, Joyce, and I know this is happening, but I would just encourage it to continue, and maybe even at a higher level. As we know, as we continue to work through these regional governance discussions, I am hopeful that something is going to rise to the surface here, and that this will get done to some level. But that the irrigation peaking that's going to be the one lever that they're going to continue to use. And we're probably one of the biggest offenders of that. If you can call it an offense, it's just what happens in our market. But they're going to use that as a lever for us. So we need to, I think, really be thinking through how we soft approach that into a situation where, hopefully in a reasonable period of time, and what's reasonable is it 1 to 3 years that we have regional governance, and we start to see real changes there, that we're not springing it on at one time. I think that there can be a way to get in front of this. I know that's what we're trying to do. Just supportive of those efforts.
I think with PFM's help, we can kind of try to hit that sweet spot where we can figure out where the reasonable majority of our folks are, so we can hit the tiers where we are actually disincentivizing overwatering. And I mean, we go back to, I think it was in 2014, we had a tiered irrigation structure in place at that time, and we removed it. So we've had that in the past, but I think it's going to be important for us to really get a good look at that and come to a good solution.
Yeah, Joyce, and we did take a look at sort of some peak month billings for the largest months of irrigation. We did this last year as kind of beginning the discussion of what this might look like. And I think 75 to 80% of your users really do make kind of the normal tier, with it's just the 20% of those top users, both residential and commercial, that are really pushing the envelope. And so I think we have a pretty good idea already of where we think those tiers need to be, but just need to, we're kind of waiting to see what metrics and sort of the bogeys we have to hit before we start making recommendations for what those tiers and what sort of costs the city would need to recapture in those tiered rates.
Right. Just to jump in here, that last item on the expenditures line in terms of the $49K for the staff promotional certification incentives, to kind of back that up in terms of detail, and Jeff and I will jump in here. This is the slide we were referring to earlier, and with water having, again, the largest need in terms of certifications and the most grades that are required for operation of our water system, we knew that the water utility would be the largest one out of the roughly $75,000 to $80,000 cost of this. We'll call it the promotional certification incentive program that we're proposing. That 49, almost 50,000 of that is proposed to come from the water utility, and you can kind of see on the slide here why that is. And Jeff, is there anything else I missed on this one that you wanted to make the council aware of on this promotional slide?
Just a quick overview as you look at it and you got the detail here in front of you. The idea is that grade 3 water license is required. We cannot operate our systems without a grade 3 on staff. And one does not do it. You know, if they're off or out of town, we have to have one that's available all the time. So as we looked at it, we kind of laid it out around that grade 3 licensing. We also looked at the sanitary sewer collection. It's not necessarily required to operate our system, but the training that's provided with that is valuable. So when we laid it out, we said there should be a little bit of incentive for that. You look at the traffic in the DOT work zone, those are ones that we encourage our people to get when they're working in those areas. But they're ones where you go to that class, and you get the certification while you're there. Water license, these guys study for hours and hours outside of work hours on their own, trying to get ready for these tests and take them. So there's a lot more to that water license, and there's a lot more incentive for us to have people with those water licenses. So that's kind of how we laid it out. The positions that are eligible for these license and grade pay are kind of laid out there. It's not everyone that necessarily is going to be able to. We don't need 16 grade 3s, but we need enough that we can support ourselves and cover ourselves if we were to lose somebody or someone were to retire, and also gives options, so it's just not one specific person that has the license that can move into it. So with that, I mean, it's laid out there, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have about the proposal.
All right. With that, we'll kind of transition back to Joyce and Suzanne for Suzanne to talk a little bit about kind of current rates, future rates, and what she's seeing around the region. Suzanne?
Yeah, well, this first slide kind of shows where our current rates are at, and we're staying in the same range for both our residential and commercial. And then the next slide, Suzanne, I'll let you step in there.
Yeah, so with the 3% increase that we are recommending for water rates, for the average residential user using 5,000 gallons a month, that would be roughly $1.16 increase to their average monthly bill. And so with that change in the residential bill, you can see that the ranking stays the same for residential and for commercial customers within all the other, the peers in the metro. Continue to stay mid-tier. The next cities are, I mean, you're just really kind of nicely in that range right there. And I will say that, you know, PFM works with a lot of the other metro cities, and there aren't many cities in the metro looking at 3% water rate increases, especially with the 15% cost of water for a lot of communities. So the water fund remains a very healthy, fiscally healthy fund. And, you know, you're in a unique position where you can now not only, you know, pass on just a portion of the increase of the cost of that water, but you're also cash funding your capital projects, which is saving you, you know, having to be tied to those debt service coverage requirements and other things. So if there are any questions on the water fund before we move on to the sewer utility, be happy to answer any other questions anyone might have.
Questions, council? Okay, let's move ahead.
Okay. So for the sewer utility, again, stable revenues, year-to-date usage up almost 4% through October when we did our cash flow updates last fall, which I don't know if anybody saw the Business Record article. It was pretty funny about the city of Des Moines losing some of their usage to the suburbs. So you're seeing a little bit of an increase in the revenues. We'll see how that continues through this fiscal year, but we're projecting stable revenues for fiscal 22. WRA costs, I would say, are stabilized. We are seeing the biogas revenue coming in, and we are preparing for a new community to join. Also, the preliminary flows are available for fiscal 22. We don't have the final WRA budget yet, but based on the flow changes, the WRF flow for the city of Clive was down 1.4%. So that does slightly reduce your allocation of WRA costs. WRA is approximately 46% of the sewer operating costs. Capital projects are supported by cash as well in the sewer fund, reserving $1 million per year for sewer replacement projects. And then again, as we've discussed, there's $18,000 per year for the new promotional certification incentives in the cash flow. And with all of that, and I will make a quick comment that looking ahead, Grimes is going to be the newest member of the WRA. I did visit with Matt Stuffel, our PFM project manager that works with the WRA, and they have some preliminary numbers for the impact of Grimes joining. He shared that there'll be a 2.7% WRA overall cost reduction for all members, and a 6% cost reduction for specifically for expansion debt. So, so more good things to come. I think a little bit of I'd say a tailwind to relieve some pressure on future sewer rates as well. With all that said, for fiscal 22, PFM is recommending a 2% rate increase for fiscal 21-22.
Yes, and then also, I mean, compared to last year, it's 1% less. That increase. We projected a 3% for this year, and we'll be able to get that down to 2%. And as Suzanne mentioned, very interesting times going forward as they're getting into the biogas project and seeing those revenues coming in now, and with expansion of and adding of new cities. So numbers are looking good. Then this slide just shows where we're at in the current rates. And also just to remind everyone, when you look at these slides on the rates, that we don't have any future projections for the other cities yet. But this slide shows that we're in the same position as we were last year for the current rates.
Excuse me, and based on a 2% rate increase for the average residential user using 5,000 gallons per month, that's 76 cents on average for their bill. And so the residential and the commercial ranking will stay the same, continue to be sort of that mid-tier range. All are WA members on the list with the exception of Grimes, who will be joining, I think officially July, the plan is July of 2022. Grimes has, as you can imagine, significant rate increases planned to pay the surcharges. They have to pay the debt to physically connect to the system. So there'll be some significant increases for Grimes specifically due to them joining the WRA. I believe that is everything we have on the sewer fund. Are there any questions that anybody might have?
And just one quick note I would throw in too, in terms of Urbandale's rate that you see on the screen here. It's just as a reminder that property taxes actually subsidize their sewer district. So they will always likely be, as long as that's the case, the lowest rate you'll see on the screen here because of that subsidization from property tax. Any questions on the sewer utility in terms of a recommendation for a 2% increase, again, less than what we were projecting last year? And part of our thought process as we were putting this together for both the water and the sewer utility is trying to tighten as much as we can on those utility fund rate increases, knowing that we, as we'll get to in the next slide, the stormwater utility, we continue to have, costs there and probably more costs to come as we continue our work on our water resources master plan.
The only question I had was, early on in COVID, we had some concerns about potential delinquencies with respect to water sewer bills. Have we seen any kind of noticeable increase, or has it been pretty steady?
Really the collections have not been, I've been pleased. We set up that payment agreement and we have a few people on it, but so far we're not having any trouble with anybody that's on a payment agreement. And it's really went very smoothly.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joyce.
Mm-hmm. Now moving into the stormwater utility, of course, that one, we have a substantial increase in our investment in those activities with flood mitigation planning projects. We have additions to staffing there. Suzanne, I'll probably let you step in here and go over the cash flow.
Sure. So looking year to year, so ERUs are up 1.39%. The good news about ERUs is they don't flux once they are there. They are there. And we do assume 1% ERU growth rate annually. So that's good news that we have just over that 1% that we're targeting for actual growth. Again, I would say, I mean, obviously revenues, we have a 10% rate increase here. So revenues will be stable based on the 10% rate increase. And the rate increase that we're talking about, as we've talked about last year, I know this has been a long time coming, is a significant capital investment. And so the budget itself for operating expenditures is only up 2.67%, which to me is sort of a cost of living adjustment. There's no extra in the budget, so to speak, in the stormwater fund. It really is the capital investment. And so $565,000 of projects identified, 550 specifically for the regional stormwater projects that are that's what's created. We're operating at a deficit, but we have the cash to use for these capital projects. And so the 10% sort of keeps pace to make sure that we keep cash positive while we're investing in that capital year to year. The 10% rate increase, so the current rate is $7.83 per ERU. Most residential users are 1 ERU, and then commercials are based on the actual number of ERUs for the property. The new proposed rate, even 10%, I know it always sounds really high, but really is 78 cents per ERU. So the new rate per ERU would be $8.61 for residential users, or per ERU for commercial users. 10% is what we had, PFM had recommended a year ago, and our rate recommendation remains 10%.
So this slide shows you where we're ranking in as far as our current rates. We're stayed the same in both categories for commercial and residential. And then if you go forward to the future rates, we'll stay just about in that same category there. We continue to be the highest.
Yeah, and I would say you're leading the way with investments in stormwater, and you're unique in that you're cash funding your stormwater projects. A lot of other communities, as they do stormwater projects, issue geo debt or levy for it and don't always put it in the stormwater fund. And so you are operating this as a true enterprise fund and using your user rates in the enterprise fund to invest in your stormwater infrastructure. So, and I think I misspoke a minute ago with some of the older rates, but the 861 goes to 947, which is 86 cents per month. So I think I had the old rate in my notes, but even with that, I mean, Clive is still leading the way, and this is definitely needed to do the projects that the city has identified as a priority. Yeah, and the city of Des Moines, they have a large number of actual stormwater revenue bonds outstanding that are rated by rating agencies, that they're, you know, obviously with those covenants, they're mandated to maintain their rate per ERU, and they're at 14.25. So they are one metro that's not on the list, one metro city that is at a higher rate than Clive.
Yeah,
And who has that higher rate than Clive?
The city of Des Moines.
They're at 14.25.
Yes.
Fine.
Yeah, so a couple questions. You know, last year we had a 10% increase in our stormwater utility. The recommendation from PFM is 10% this year. Do we anticipate a 10% increase next year as well?
Yes. We have 10% in 22, and then in 23 we're dropping to 5%. We think we're trying to incrementally get to where I think we need to be to sustain that level of capital investment annually. And so rather than do one large increase, we've just made it over multiple years.
I get it. You're spread it out. We understand that. You know, one of the notions that said on there was Oxbow, and last year we invested $250,000 in a new excavator to try and keep those costs down to do those in-house. How come that cost is listed in there if we're doing that in-house?
So the cost for, are you talking about the cost for the Oxbows or the cost for the excavator?
Well, we've already paid for the excavator. The point being is that Oxbow was listed under stormwater utility as a rationale for increasing to 10% increase. My question is if we've already med that $250,000 investment in the excavator. Why is that listed as a rationale for the increase?
Well, that's just one component, Councilmember Klein. So that the excavator itself is, when we looked at the math in terms of renting that equipment versus buying it, it made more sense for us to buy that used excavator. That isn't the only cost associated with Oxbow projects or stream bank stabilization projects. You know, then you have whether you need rock or you need other equipment beyond just the excavator to do that. And so a lot of our capital investment, whereas we do have things like Oxbows and stream bank stabilization, we also have stormwater projects. Probably the biggest cost factor right now is the stormwater components to our street reconstruction projects. So for example, Clark Street, when we're looking at replacing the entire street and we have storm sewer to replace, and then also to conform, to comply with our own post-construction stormwater management ordinance. As you'll see with the Clark Street project later this year, we have bioswales and rain gardens and plantings that go along with that. Again, those are all stormwater related expenses that this utility is starting to bear. And I know that there's been substantial percentage increases in this fund. And I think what's really important to keep in mind is that, like the city of Des Moines, even though their rate is substantially higher than ours, over $14 per ERU, we're both unique communities in the sense of we're the downstream, we're the down at the bottom of the hill communities, where we're dealing with substantial amount of stormwater projects within our greenbelt, flooding, you know, the flood buyout program, which most of that has been funded through general fund excess revenues, but some has come from stormwater in terms of matching funds, whether it's for FEMA or buyouts or helping out with technical assistance. So there's a lot in that bucket, I guess is what I'm saying. And Oxbows is maybe a small component of it because yes, we do have some equipment now that we're utilizing for those. But just to kind of further Suzanne's point is that the capital demand on this fund is significant and is depending on your conversations related to the water resources master plan, could grow over time. And so we're trying to put ourselves in a position with this utility to be able to have the structure, revenue structure in place to handle that. And there might be a point where we do have to look at debt versus what we do with the other two utilities that have are substantially bigger sizes in terms of revenue and expenses and have a lot more cash on hand. The stormwater utility is a much smaller utility in scope. And so that'll all be a part of what we'll present and discuss with the council as a part of that water resources master plan, and whether it's strictly the utility funding that, or is it a portion of property tax, or is it, you know, a portion of our local option sales tax revenues, which stormwater improvements are authorized under that, under those resolutions. And so I hope that answers your question, Councilmember Klein, of just the scope of what those capital improvements could be.
Yeah, and that's what I was looking for, Matt, was more detail to justify the double-digit increases year after year. So appreciate that.
Happy to do that.
I would also add that with, I think, a couple of things. Number one, we were one of the first cities to form a utility. We recognized the need to do it early on. But I think secondly, also the council over time, but particularly now, has really prioritized stormwater management and really being aggressive, I think, in that area. And that just generates projects. It generates a lot of projects. So I think we're looking to the utility to hold its own weight, if you will. For that, this is a pretty big priority of the council. So that's important. Matt, when did Des Moines start their utility? Have they always had one, or do you know?
Oh, I don't know. Suzanne or Doug, maybe, or
I'm looking at their last stormwater OS. I'm cheating.
yeah, I need some help on that one. I don't recall when they set theirs up, but one thing to keep in mind with theirs, their buyouts program that's been well publicized following the 2018 flood was pretty extensive, and that was a huge driver, if I remember Suzanne, the jump in their rate was the huge buyout program. We've obviously done a buyout program, but at a much smaller scale than at the scale that Des Moines has done particularly on the east side of the community along 4 Mile Creek.
Sure. Well, I think that, you know, a lot of this is activity driven. And so I to Eric's point, you know, I like the feathering approach. I think that's always better. I think that's just better planning and forethought. So I think we're on a good path here. I don't know that the the long-term solution is to, hey, if we want to drop back to 5% or 3% or 2%, that we reduce our number of projects, because I think we all just understand the priority that this is in our community. So anyways, taking leadership to show that, and this is just happens to be part of that.
And if I could add on to that, Your Honor, too, is that when we get to the February 4th work session here in a couple of weeks, and really start to dive into the water resources master plan and start talking about some of the bigger questions, the financial structure is going to be one of them. And that'll be an ongoing conversation as we work through that plan through 2021 here, in terms of structure of the rates, you know, equity between commercial and residential, other kind of creative financial approaches within the utility or outside of the utility. This will be a big topic for the balance of 2021. So what you see before you today is really kind of the status quo of how we've been treating this utility. But I would say a year from now, we're going to probably be having a different conversation, depending on some of the policy choices that'll be in front of the council.
Your Honor, and to answer I was going to say real quick, to answer the question, I did look up, the city of Des Moines established their stormwater utility in fiscal 1994-95, which would have probably been after the major flood events of 1993.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, comments?
Matt, is there a reason not to include Des Moines in their higher rate on the table?
We typically haven't in the other utility, the water and sewer utility rates, just because of the size of the city. We kind of kept with the suburbs. I mean, we could easily add Des Moines to this list if the council desires, but we know with the way Des Moines Waterworks is structured on the water side, and Des Moines doesn't typically end up as a comparison for us in most things, whether it's property tax rate or utility rates. We haven't included them in the past, but if that's something the council would like to see, we can definitely do that in the future.
Well, to some extent, as you mentioned, they have some of the same issues that we have. And if we included it, if someone looked at the chart, they would know by comparison, oh, well, Clive is not really the highest in the metro.
Correct.
Right. And a lot of the cities, there was 4 of them last year that took some substantial jumps. Johnston's went up, Ankeny, Waukee, West Des Moines.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's becoming, people are focusing on it more and more. And so, yeah, I think that I don't think PFM works with a single utility on the list that didn't have an increase that was more than 5% in stormwater. You know, so it just depends on where they're at in the process and where they're at in their investment and how they're funding their capital and how they're prioritizing their stormwater projects are different from city to city.
And I think that's a good point that Suzanne brings up that I think is important for the council to hear in terms of the balance between these 3 utilities. You know, as we talked about the water utility and a 3% rate increase, that is one of the lowest in the metro area. Most are going to be double what we're doing in terms of rate increases. And sanitary sewer, we're also on the lower end in terms of percentage rate increases that communities are considering. So when you look at the 3 together in a dollar amount package, although I totally understand when you see a 10% rate increase, it can kind of jump out at you. But when you look at the actual dollar amount, just by us trimming that sewer rate increase from 3% to 2%, we almost make up what the sanitary, or excuse me, what the stormwater utility rate is going up. And so when you look at all of our utilities together as a package on a utility bill, I think we're very competitive in the metro area.
And just to put them all together, on a residential bill for 5,000 gallons a month, it would be $2.77 increase over all three utilities.
Which I can tell you is a dollar amount that I'm seeing in just one of the three cash flows in other communities.
In terms of that low, Suzanne?
Yeah, or more. I mean, yeah, that dollar amount or higher in other cash flows, generally speaking.
All right, any other questions on stormwater? Thank you, Suzanne.
Yes.
Jumping to just the last quick item on the general fund, that the small amount general fund supports certain aspects of public works activity. Most of it is the engineering, traffic safety portion, and it's just a percentage of those expenses. For example, engineering is spread across the three utilities, road use, and the general fund equally for those activities, because the engineering division does work on park and trail projects, which we kind of consider on the general fund side of activity. And then lastly, just noting on the street lighting program, again, around 200,000 annually split between the general and road use fund. We reevaluate that annually with the impacts to kind of unknown pandemic impacts, and kind of keep continuing to work through that here in 2021. We didn't want to make any changes at this point, but again, we revisit that every year. And then lastly, Your Honor, just a summary of what we have before you and any final direction or comments from council on the four policy questions there. And then just next steps in terms of incorporation to the overall budget. And as is typical, pending your full review of the budget, when the budget is brought forward for you for approval in March, that would be the trigger point when we start the first reading of the ordinances to adjust the utility rates. So with that, Your Honor, I will turn it back to you for any further comments or direction.
Thank you, Matt, Joyce, Suzanne, everybody that, Jeff, that has worked hard to give us the guidance that we need to have to make great decisions. And so I appreciate what's here. I guess I would ask council for any other comments or questions, so we make sure that we get them out there and as we continue our work on the budget. Hearing none, Matt, we'll move forward with next steps.
Yeah, we will move forward with incorporating items 1 through 4, and then we'll the next council meeting will be bringing forward the second half of the proposed city manager's proposed budget, which will be focused on the general fund and the trust and agency fund.
Okay, very good. Thank you. As it relates to the agenda, and I know it's been a long night, so we can be brief on this if we'd like. We didn't have reports reflected at the bottom of the agenda, so I would go down to Pete. And Pete, if you have anything to share with the group, and then we'll go through.
I'll be very short. If tonight we're just making the emphasis with folks to please get your vehicles off the street, because this is going to be an event that is going to be with us for quite a while on Friday. So we'll be pressing that out to our community, and the community responded well last time. We expect they will this time as well.
Thank you, Pete. Ted.
All right, real quick. I think like most of you, I've attended the Greater Des Moines Partnership kickoff this morning. I thought it was really well done. I thought their strategic priorities for the year were spot on, and definitely meet the time. So I was real impressed with that. And I don't know if all of you know this, but the Greater Des Moines Partnership DC trip is been rescheduled for September. I believe the September 22nd to the 24th. That's tentative, obviously, but that is the current plan for that trip. MPO, the Water Trails is moving along. They've hired Snyder and Associates as the owner's rep. The schematic design for the dam mitigation is the big focus right now. I believe that is due in February, and then final plans will be reviewed in March, and with the hope for those plans to be submitted to the Iowa DOT in May. So Water Trails is definitely moving along, making progress. And then last thing, I think we may have seen this other places, but the Iowa Home Builders Association is proposing a bill to prohibit city stormwater regulation, so that individual cities cannot do anything beyond what the federal and state legislation is. And so the MPO may get someone involved in that as well. I know Ankeny had some real concerns about that in addition to us. So that's definitely something for all of us to be aware of and to make sure we stay on top of. Obviously, we don't want that to get enacted. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Ted. It certainly doesn't expand home rule, does it?
Not at all.
Yeah, we'll watch that very, very closely. So appreciate your comments there. Eric.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Eric. John.
I just wanted to again congratulate Councilmember McCoy on his excellent job in his position as Executive Director of Metro Waste in finding the fraud, bringing it to light, and then seeing that justice was done. I mean, it was an amazing multi-year process to bring it to conclusion. He did a heck of a job and benefits all the member communities of Metro Waste.
Hear, hear. Thank you, John. Thank you, Michael.
Professor. Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
John, anything else for the group?
That's enough for tonight, I think.
Okay, it's been a busy week. We had MAC, MyAlg, Mayor's Group. Of course, we had the breakfast this morning. It was great to see the showing from the Clive Council and the city of Clive at that event. Ted, to your point, I think it was well done, and appreciated the results from that. We have facility meeting tomorrow morning as we continue to move public safety forward. Pretty exciting stuff, and really starting to cook with gas now. And then we have District 1 planning meeting, committee meeting tomorrow as well. So a lot's going on this week. All good as we move things forward. I'm going to back up quickly to the MyAlg meeting. That's the mayor's dinner group meeting, Metro Mayors, and we talked about the water trails project quite a bit. I'm going to look forward to having, and Matt will schedule this, the Great Outdoors Foundation to come out and really make a formalized presentation to the council. Because make no mistake, there's city buy-in to that project, that regional project. So I think my sense is, anyway, not to get too far ahead of things, but my sense is that we have a general level of support for that mission. But it's going to get more specific as we go forward. There's going to be 2080 agreements, and they have a fairly aggressive schedule on the 2080 agreements to May-June timeframe. So they've got a lot of councils to touch. And I think that's really important that they come visit with you and really go through the project thoroughly and really speak to the benefit of the city of Clive as a result of that project and our association and collaboration with that, because it's a heck of a project. And a lot of people have worked very hard so far on that. So make a note of that, plan on that in the near term, because that will be coming as well. Okay, that's all I have. Susan, how about you?
Well, Michael Alowitz, who was mentioned tonight as moving on to the Planning and Zoning Board, is also the president of the Clive Historical Society. And he's very interested in identifying some new board members. So if anyone has any suggestions, you can let them know. They've got kind of an exciting project that they're going to be announcing that would be in honor of Les Oshheim. So I know everybody will be interested in that. And watershed groups of various types continue to meet, and tomorrow the North Raccoon Watershed Management Authority will meet virtually.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Michael?
I do not have anything. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Madam Council?
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Matt, we'll hand it to you.
Just a few quick items. Of course, Pete mentioned the winter storm. So when you wake up tomorrow morning, we might have a pretty good blizzard on our hands, just in terms of what's been shared with us. Just a note for our public safety center that's currently under construction. The folks went out and did a little extra bracing on some of our precast walls that are standing, since that kind of sits at the top of the hill, especially the fire apparatus side that kind of sits to the northwest. So just wanted to make note of that. As I mentioned earlier, public works crews are already out and will be out all night long into the day tomorrow and probably into the evening on Friday, based on forecasts of what's been shared with us and the wind speeds. Do not want to go to Northwest Iowa tomorrow, I will say that, based on these wind speeds. So anyway, operations are underway. And then lastly, that was, I think talked about earlier, was we do have some new baby goats, and I will be sharing those photos with you all tomorrow that were born yesterday morning. So we think there might be another one on the way, but they are happy and healthy. And Ryan, with our parks maintenance staff, who's basically their new father, he checks on them every morning. He saw them yesterday morning, and Mama and the two babies are doing well, and we're adding to the herd for chewing up more parts of the greenbelt here, invasive species in the greenbelt here this spring. So I'll share some photos of that for you all in my weekly update tomorrow. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Matt, thank you. Council questions for Matt? Covered a lot of ground tonight, so appreciate it very much. Matthew, any other correspondence that we need to be aware of?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Council, anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, I'm going to adjourn us at 9:06 p.m. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.